V2CH.17 into the gunfight. 30 minutes before the Sororitas made their first contact with the heretics inside the Scholastica, it was still bustling at the mess hall as lunchtime was coming to a close. Wellmana was just about to dig in when someone sat down across the table. While the place was of a communal setup and table sharing was the norm, the fact that there were plenty of empty seats around made Wellmana look up from her tray of food. She relaxed upon recognizing who had come to share her table. "Hey, if it isn't the scholar thrice blessed by the throne, how are you doing?" teased the newcomer, a young brunette in power armor with a friendly smile, a rare expression to be found on a battle sister. "Mireia, it has been a while," Wellmana said to her old friend. "Indeed, look at you. Who could have guessed the meekest girl in the dorm back then could one day be slapping a high confessor?" Mireia said teasingly, putting her standard issue Sabbat pattern helmet down on the table before asking another question. "So, what made you so bold?" Wellmana stumbled for a second, finding it hard to explain herself. "I was caught up in the moment. After witnessing the events up close, it was hard not to get angry." "Really?" Mireia asked. "I swear by the throne." "Huh. It does feel like you have somehow changed. Surely you are just pulling my leg again," Wellmana scoffed, but found the tease not unwelcoming. Being bunkmates back at the old novitiate days meant that Mireia was one of the few associates she could comfortably lessen formalities with. Mireia's smile broadened before she bent over to whisper her next question. "So, how many miracles have you personally witnessed? And how is it?" "Witnessed miracles?" The questions triggered Wellmana's recent memories of the vision, as the visage of the master of mankind abruptly flashed before her mind. Wellmana found herself overwhelmed by intense emotions. So divine, such glory. "I have seen." Wellmana so very much wanted to tell her friend and the rest of the world of what she saw before sharply remembering her promise to keep it a secret. Lost in memory of the Emperor's divine grandeur, it took a while before she finally replied. It was glorious. By then Wellmana finally noticed the unusual quietness that had settled on the mess hall. More alarmingly, Mireia was looking at her with a strange expression. "What?" Wellmana asked. "Is everything all right?" Mireia asked with a hint of concern. Wellmana suddenly became aware that tears were running down from her eyes, and everyone around was looking at her. Embarrassed, she quickly wiped her tears off. Before their conversation could continue, a siren sounded. At the same time, Vox messages crackled out from most of the helmets in the mess hall, shattering the brief tranquility. Even without listening to the full messages, Wellmana knew the battle sisters were being summoned. "Gotta go. Catch up with you later," Mireia said before grabbing her helmet and hurriedly left. Wellmana watched as her friend stormed out with the others, their armored boots cracking sharply on the monastery's marble floor before fading into the distance. Sensing the unusually tense atmosphere, Wellmana's gut told her that this was not a drill before a pang of hunger reminded her why she was in the mess hall. Turning her attention back to her food, Wellmana had just started drinking her soup when she was again interrupted by a buzz. Annoyed, the scholar took out her communicator and looked at the caller's identity. Upon seeing the displayed name, she quickly accepted the call. "Wellmana speaking." "Sister Wellmana," Palatine Domini's voice came through with her signature pitch. "Join us immediately at the primary staging area. We have an emergency mission and will be moving out soon." "Huh, but my duty." "Sister, listen to me," the normally courteous Domini interrupted, hinting at the seriousness of the situation. "Your charge left a moment ago on a gunship. We will be heading to the same area." It took a moment for Wellmana to understand what the Palatine meant, and she stood up in shock, the sound of her spoon hitting the floor reverberating throughout the hall. "We finally made contact with the hostiles." The enemy combatants were armed men in flak armor covered by makeshift combat fatigues, and their movements suggested having received a decent amount of military training. Unfortunately for these guys, their standard issue armor offered little to no protection against bolt rounds. They might as well have been naked when pitted against the Sororitas and their bolters. The sisters, on the other hand, had more than proven their status as elite shock troops. As an avid gamer who had spent thousands of hours on first-person shooters, I was confident from the start that our advantage was overwhelming in a standard shootout. The sisters had bigger guns, power armor, better training, nerves of steel, and best of all, were provided with literal wall hacks by my abilities. How these advantages panned out in real life, though, far exceeded my expectations. Superior in almost every metric against our opponents, the sisters gunned our way through the grim corridors of the Scholastica, barely breaking stride as we proceeded towards the thickest concentration of enemies in the lower levels. We soon established a routine. I would hear random heretics approaching from a distance away and drop a warning, and after confirming their positions with short bursts of my detection waves, I instantly updated the tactical system and the sisters would handle the rest. It was brutal, like watching a group of seasoned Diamond League elite players mercilessly steamrolling newbies in a shooter games team deathmatch. More than once, some random armed heretics would turn a corner only to have their brains and innards splattered on the walls, and the rest of their comrades hardly had the time to react before being overwhelmed by the sororitas. I witnessed firsthand how the Battle Sisters fully exploited their advantage by walking straight in, bolters blazing at near point-blank range, shouting praises to the God Emperor. The surprised cultists usually returned few if any shots, and those lucky enough to hit bounced harmlessly off the sisters' power armor. Watching the sororitas doing their work from a relatively safe distance behind, I almost pitied the cultists. The sisters, on the other hand, relished in their systematic destruction of the heretics and were seemingly joyous when dishing out their lethal retributions. The two leading Dominion squads, with their expert usage of stormbolters, especially impressed me. The sights and sounds of them rapidly laying down massive amounts of bolt rounds with such accuracy was horrifying to behold. Equally terrifying was the mess they left behind. Their gruesome work painted the drab interiors of the place with blood, human remains, and miniature craters. Through it all, Alicia was exemplary as a field commander, leading from the front while dropping sharp and clear instructions to her sisters. With the sororitas doing a great job with sanctioned violence, Thabris rarely used his weapon, though I noted that every time the Inquisitor fired his master-crafted bolt pistol, a random head would burst on the other side. His fighting style was as cold and meticulous as his personality. I was walking past another pile of dead cultists when my shoe almost stepped into a rapidly forming pool of blood. Like breaking from a trance, for the first time a realization came to me about how knee-deep I was in this bloody business of homicide. No, sir, this is not a video game. People did not turn into a loot box or disappear after they got taken out. Dying cultists twitched and squirmed on the floor, lying in a puddle of their own blood, piss, and innards while desperately holding on to their fading life. Looking at the sheer savagery of violence on display, a part of me who was still a pacifist normie was starting to freak out. In stark contrast, Thabris and the sororitas spared no extra glance on the fallen after making sure they were no longer a threat. I feel out of place, but there was no going back now. I asked for this after all, recalling my reason being here. I steeled my resolve and pressed forwards. Halfway through the motion, my attention was pulled towards a particular transmission in the air and automatically tuned into it with my earpiece. After a brief wash of static, voices started popping in my ear. "Captain Mokitar, can you hear me?" asked a man, his voice harsh and hard. A heartbeat later, an even harsher voice replied amidst background sounds of fierce firefights. "I hear you, go ahead. A gunship did a strafing run on our position a moment ago. Contact seems to have been lost with the topside overwatch teams." "What? How long ago was that, and why are you only informing me now?" Mokitar asked. "My apologies, it was a few minutes ago. The main Vox operator and some people were killed. We held firm and are still now pushing back the Imperial dogs. I have sent people to check on the topside, and we will know what happened soon," the first voice replied. There were a few deep breaths before Mokitar spoke again. "Did you get a good look at what type of gunship it was? Am I to assume the corpse worshippers had inserted troops from the top of the building?" Corpse worshippers was a standard derogatory term used by followers of chaos for the Imperials, due to the Emperor of Mankind being a literal corpse since the end of Horus Heresy. I had come across the term many times in stories about this universe. To hear it in real life with such a hateful tone added a layer of indescribable context. "No idea of the gunship model. It went by too fast to be identified," the first voice responded. "Judging from the two samples here, having a harsh, deep voice that made you sound like a typical B-movies bad guy might be a prerequisite to climb the heretical leadership ladder. That said, this Mokitar guy was really quick on the uptake. They will soon know we are here." With a flick of my mind, I jammed the channel with static noise like it was the most natural thing. A bit stumped by my own reflexive action, I turned to Thabarus and tried to pick up signs if he noticed what just transpired, only to receive a questioning look from the Inquisitor. I spoke into the command channel that connected me, Thabarus, and Alicia. The heretic commander outside just contacted their main leader in the building. They are aware of our possible insertion. The Palatine paused slightly upon hearing what I said, but quickly resumed her stride. What did they say? Thabarus asked. I noted the Inquisitor did not even bother to inquire about how the information was acquired. They are sending people to check on their roof teams, so our advantage of surprise should expire soon. I have jammed their channel for now, I answered just as another transmission flared up, prompting me to join in automatically again. My captain, can you hear me? The first voice came through again. Instinctively, I knew this was a different channel, probably a backup. My mind turned and I realized a lot more could be done. I first jammed the new channel before unjamming the previous channel, in the process connecting myself to Mokitar. Activating thought acceleration, I synthesized the voice of the first heretic in my head before playing the result on the other side. My captain, can you hear me? I even used the same line. You broke off for a while, speak? Mokitar, who had stayed on the first channel, replied, sounding impatient with echoes of a heavy gun battle still raging around him. Thinking fast, I started to bullshit Mokitar. My men have reached the roof. The topside teams are badly mauled by the gunship, but there are survivors. They reported no troop insertion. I repeat, no troops. Then I trailed off, jammed the channel again, and left it at that. Ending the call, the absurdity of me pranking a cultist leader almost made me laugh out loud despite the fact I just witnessed some highly unpleasant and gruesome events up close. Is this a coping mechanism? I noticed Thabarus was giving me his, "What's up?" look. I shrugged and said, I bought us some time, but it won't be long. Just as that statement was made, my mind picked up yet another transmission flaring up on a new and different channel. Bastards are persistent. Too bad, I will just jam it again. Can anyone hear me? Against my expectation, a new voice came through. Similar to the heretic leader, sounds of gunshots were cracking in the background of this newcomer. Thorn here, I hear you. To my surprise, Thabarus responded to it. He lit the way forward for humanity, the new voice said without any context. Without him, we are damned and will be lost in eternal darkness, the Inquisitor replied without skipping a beat. What the? Thabarus has contacts inside this place? By the throne. Thorn, is that really you? The voice asked with barely concealed emotion. Yes, Kale, I am close. The cavalry is on its way. What happened and what is your situation? These heretics appeared suddenly out of nowhere. We are currently barricaded in the reinforced section before the plasma generators. How close are you? Asked Kale, whoever this person was. Very close. How long can you hold? There was another round of intense exchange of gunfire before Kale's voice came through again. Not for long. We are pinned hard. Hold on just a little longer. Help is on the way. Thorn out. Thabarus finished his conversation before speaking into the command channel. Move faster. We have people in dire need of our aid. Before long, we reached a junction where constant gunshots could be heard and I sensed a lot of people in front. It was the main event. I ordered the team to hold before sending out a wide detection wave to scan the area. Immediately, a detailed three-dimensional image of the area solidified in my mind, and enemy positions lit up like angry rashes on an infected skin. There were more than 4 dozen heretics between us and the besieged Imperials. The way forward was narrowed down into a long corridor about 50 meters in length, leading into another wider area. The corridor was guarded by 2 small squads of cultists, rear guards to watch their backs. Mokitar was not taking any chances despite my attempts at misdirection. As I updated the tactical information and shared it to my team, the opposition's numerical advantage made even Thabarus pause. So many, we need a plan, the Inquisitor whispered. You got any suggestions? I asked. It would be nice if we could have a few grenades exploding in their midst. Thabarus said almost jokingly before asking, do you still intend to attempt capturing the leader in this situation? Earlier that day, to make my case to tag along, I had reasoned with Thabarus that it would be quite safe as the enemies would not expect me to show up. While the Inquisitor conceded on that point, he still saw no reason for me to take the risk. Needing a push, I upped the ante and offered to attempt capturing the enemy leader alive with my unconventional abilities if permitted to go. That notion of being able to retrieve valuable information greatly tempted Thabarus, and in response he threw an inquisitive side glance at Neandra. The Imperial assassin was silent for a while before shrugging and dropped her verdict. If she is serious, there might be no better qualified person on this planet for the task. Looking at the enemy composition, it would be a low-risk combat experience for her. With Neandra vouching for me, Thabarus finally conceded to let me join the mission. Now it was time to prove the value of my words. Activating thought acceleration, everything around me slowed down as I studied the situation in greater detail. There were a myriad of dead bodies scattered across the area, hinting at the intensity of battle that had been raging for a while now. What caught my attention was some unusual figures with distinctive, sinister-looking armor amongst the fallen. Who are these? Chaos Elite troopers? At a loss of what I was seeing, my attention shifted back to the situation at hand. Currently, the heretic main force was focusing on the entrenched Imperials with two small squads watching their back. Now that I think about it, since our opponents were all unaugmented humans, Thabarus' casual mention of grenades attack was not a bad idea. Grenades being a standard wargear for the well-armed Sororitas, I could get a few from them, then go enshrouded for the attack. Crude but effective. With the idea in place, I double-checked my readings on the individuals guarding the corridor, carefully examined each and every one of them for advanced optics or eye implants that might spoil my plan. I found nothing that seemed capable of bypassing my stealth field. This could work. Now I just needed to locate and capture Mokadar alive to complete all my objectives. Looking at my readings, I noticed an individual in the middle of the main heretic ranks that might be the leader. Unlike his comrades, this person wore a proper set of carapace armor complete with shoulder pads decorated with extra spikes. Going by my meta-knowledge regarding the forces of chaos, being extra spiky was definitely a mark of status. My gut feelings informed me this was Mokatar, but I had to be sure. I sent out a short sensor wave targeting this individual before connecting myself to the first channel the heretics had used. Captain, do you read me? I masqueraded as his subordinate again. In real time, I witnessed the prime suspect touching his earpiece before a familiar harsh voice came through on my side. Speak. Bingo, that's the heretic captain right here. I dropped and jammed the channel again. It was time to execute my plan. Alicia, I called out, beckoning her. Yes? The Palatine came over respectfully. 2 frag grenades, please. I requested with my hands out. Alicia hesitated for a half a second before dutifully taking off 2 of those deadly devices from her pouch and offered them to me. The grenades felt cold and hard to the touch. For a second, I was about to remark about them being surprisingly lightweight before remembering my transhuman strength. What is the fuse time and the effective ranges for these? I asked, needing the details to plan my attack. 4 to 5 seconds after the safety pin is removed. Resulting blast is lethal within a radius of 5 meters, incapacitating up to about 15 meters for standard humans. Alicia answered smoothly. While I expected an informative answer, until this moment it never crossed my mind that a pretty young lady like her could be so well versed on details for such horrible stuff. It felt wrong. That aside, there was still a final hurdle that proved to be a headache. How was I supposed to pull this off without exposing my stealth ability? I was still confirming with Alicia about how to properly pull grenade pins when Thabarus, who was watching from the side, voiced his concerns. For real? And how do you plan to deliver these? Before I could say anything, there was a sudden loud explosion in the front. As everyone instinctively turned to look, in slow motion I realized this was my chance. Pushing thought acceleration to the max, I activated my shadow walk ability and dashed out with all my strength. In the blink of an eye, I passed by the sisters in front of us. None reacted. No one saw I ran out. My hearts were racing, for I was about to do something that would either be very awesome or very stupid. It was the moment of truth as I rushed into the corridor with a grenade in each hand. My hearts pumped faster as I was half expecting rounds to be cracking at me by this point. No shots came. In the long corridor, some of the heretic rear guards were looking back at their main force, checking on the commotion. As for the others who were still watching the corridor, none reacted to my entry. It worked. Exerting myself, I crossed over 50 meters of the enemy defensive line in less than 3 seconds. While dashing over many dead bodies, I got a good look at the unusual figures from earlier. Their armor was jet black and looked even more sinister up close. But weirdly, these did not feel like they belonged to the enemy. Still totally clueless of these mysterious figures, I pushed them out of my head and focused back on the mission, uncontested. I reached the end of the corridor and slipped into the main heretic crowd. This was by far the most horrible place of what I had seen in the Scholastica. The air was dusty with a persistent smell of gunpowder, sweat, blood, and bodily waste. Debris, dead bodies, and countless spent bullet casings littered the whole place, while angry men with desperate energy were moving about, shooting and cursing. Making a beeline towards my target, I avoided colliding with a few random heretics due to my pseudo-invisibility and soon found myself standing beside the heretic leader. Mokitar was an intimidating figure, tall and muscular. He had the face of a seasoned fighter that hinted of crawling out from some ghetto hellhole to become its champion. Standing close to 6 feet tall, he radiated an exceedingly cruel aura, the type of person that would make past life me flinch by his mere attention. The heretic leader's imposing quality was further amplified by his choice of fashion. He wore a set of dark carapace armor. Both his helmet and his shoulder pads were decorated with sharp-looking large spikes. A huge chaos symbol was painted proudly in blood red over his chest piece, while another metallic emblem of chaos hung from his neck, as if anyone could misidentify his allegiance. Marking Mokitar's individualism further, he was carrying a large, decorated combat shotgun instead of an autogun like the rest. The whole fearsome appearance was completed with some freshly cut human ears hanging on his belt, trophies that were still dripping blood. Not pleasant at all. While Mokitar barked orders to his underlings, I surveyed the area and soon identified 2 prime spots for maximum carnage. After running a few quick simulations inside my head on grenades throwing to ensure accuracy, it was time for action. Still shrouded, I pulled the safety pins off my grenades and then counted 2 seconds before tossing one to each side. As the primed grenades bounced into their respective positions with deadly precision, I dismissed my shroud and dropped my greetings. "Hello, Mokitar." My abrupt appearance made all the cultists turn to me in shock. Even the heretic leader himself flinched at the sudden development, but it was too late for them to react. Going psychically active, I unleashed my power like that misfiring incident at the monastery, but this time done on purpose. My halo blasted out in blinding radiance with a powerful psychic message. Repent. And then the grenades exploded. V2CH.18 Scholastica. It was 10 minutes after the Sororitas battle convoy had embarked from their monastery to the Scholastica, and Wellmana was swaying to the motion of a rhino armored transport as it thundered towards the combat zone. As a non-combatant, Wellmana was given one of the innermost seats, just beside the entrance to the driver's compartment. Sitting across her was a grim-faced Malin who they picked up just before leaving. Moments earlier, Malin had shown up last minute at the staging area, somehow catching wind of the situation. The preacher had quickly kicked up a fuss as she demanded to come along. Domini had considered leaving the mini-storm representative behind, and the Palatine had even quietly consulted with Wellmana about the possible repercussions for such an action that bordered on outright insubordination against the church. In a decision that Wellmana herself was unsure of being pragmatic or sympathetic for Malin, she advised against it. Silently, Wellmana suspected it came down to the fact she could not imagine herself being left out of something like this. So the scholar and the priest eventually shared the same ride together with Domini and her retinue of Celestian squad. The stern-faced elite sisters paid little heed to the pair of non-combatants, their dull silver power armor and cold optics flickering in the dim interior light, cold metals clicking as they checked and rechecked their many sanctified weapons. Palatine Domini was seated furthest away from Wellmana, just beside the rear access ramp as per the Sororita's tradition of being the first to step into a battlefield as the leader. Eyes closed and arms crossed, Domini was motionless while her Vox unit buzzed constantly with tactical updates. Just as Wellmana had started to drift off, Domini's eyes suddenly snapped open and she started speaking into her Vox. Too far away to hear the Palatine's conversation, Wellmana's mind nevertheless started darting around, imagining the worst scenarios. Is she getting some bad news? Did anything happen to Lady SYRINE? No, that's not possible. She's a miniature Primarch after all. It is not like those damned heretics can be more dangerous than a greater demon. Domini looks so serious, though. But then again, she always looks serious. Sister Wellmana, Preacher Malin, being suddenly addressed by Domini jolted Wellmana to attention, and what the Palatine said next surprised her further. Would any of you like to join a forward strike force? The Inquisition is kind enough to divert their gunship for us to deliver a team straight into the Scholastica. I am commanding the convoy, so I won't be going. If you are keen, I am going. Malin raised her hands in response before Domini finished her words. Somehow the idea that the preacher was more devoted than herself irritated Wellmana. Raising her hand, she responded the only way possible. I am going too. The world around me descended into utter mayhem after I dropped my holy flashbang grenade attack. What was intended to be a brief distraction ended up a hell lot more effective than I anticipated. Whether they were wounded by my grenades or not, almost all the cultists in my vicinity were shrieking in agony. I read intense emotions of terror, confusion, and regret from their minds, and any semblance of military discipline they had previously displayed had vanished without a trace. In the midst of the pandemonium, Mokitar screamed and swung at me with his shotgun, using it as an improvised club. Things slowed down as I focused on the cultist captain. He was not incapacitated like the others despite receiving my psychic blast at point-blank range, proving himself to be made of sterner stuff. Still, it was clear that he was severely affected as blood was streaming down from his nose and his eyes were closed. I easily avoided his desperate attack, then retaliated by smashing his right arm just below the shoulder pad. Something broke with a gruesome snap. Mokitar let out a muted screech and dropped his massive shotgun. I reached out before the weapon even hit the floor, grabbed the heretic leader by his throat, and almost instantly regretted it. Not only was his skin rough and sweaty to the touch, it came with an odd sensation that felt off. Despite being still in shock, Mokitar displayed impressive reflexes by immediately pulling out a serrated combat knife with his left hand and slashed out. His movements flowed so seamlessly that I could easily envision them honed through a lifetime of deadly bouts. The sinister-looking weapon was even coated with a thin layer of unknown liquid. Poison blade? This guy is a real nasty piece of work. Unfortunately for the heretic captain, while he was remarkably fast for a human, his opponent was a mini-godling, and in my view his knife was moving at a snail's pace. I casually intercepted the attack with a right-hand chop onto his wrist, breaking more bones and causing him to let out a muffled scream of pain before dropping the knife. After losing both weapons, Mokitar finally overcame his temporary blindness and got a good look at me. His eyes widened with disbelief as he uttered, "The false saint. Huh, so they even have a nickname for me." While our clash took only a few seconds, a few nearby cultists turned shakily to me with weapons raised. Too slow. I quickly lifted Mokitar up despite his protests and swung him like a living club to smash the nearest combatants away, probably breaking something else in the process as he fainted after that. That done, it was time to go and face the second biggest hurdle of my plan. The question of whether my shroud would work while carrying an extra person. While having no idea on the limitations of this ability, I was cautiously optimistic and consigned this to a 50-50 chance of luck. In gaming terms, it was a roll of 4+ out of a 6-sided dice. I lifted the motionless Mokitar and placed him unceremoniously over my shoulder like a sack of potatoes, then dismissed my halo to activate Shadow Walk. The odd sensation of something off hit me again, and nothing happened. No Shadow Walk. Come on. For the love of... Half panicking, I looked around and noted the cultists were slowly recovering from their shock. Shroud or not, it was time to move. Since I would be running back without Shadow Walk, my allies needed to be notified in case of friendly fire. With a flick of my mind, I connected myself to our open channel and spoke into the comms. "Sisters, be advised, I am coming back." "Lady SYRINE, where did you go?" Alicia cut in, sounding uncharacteristically anxious. "Location tracker shows you are somehow in the front." Thabris interrupted with a flabbergasted tone. "Don't tell me you just went in and apprehended the leader?" "Location tracker?" I was puzzled for a split second before noticing a faint signal emanating from my new earpiece, a built-in feature. "Yes, I am returning with a prisoner." "Don't shoot." I cut the link and started my journey back, silently praying my prisoner would survive the short trip. I readied myself for the gauntlet and sent out auspex to check the situation in the long corridor. What I saw shocked me. The Sororitas were charging over, heedless of the Overwatch fire about to be laid down by the entrenched enemy rear guards. Fortunately, most of these guys were still distracted by the unusual commotion behind them and were slow to react. But by now they had finally noticed the sisters and hurriedly started shooting. Oh no, you don't. With Mokitar still over my shoulder, I dashed through the corridor, covering a huge distance in 2 quick leaps and crashing at full speed into a 2-man heavy weapons team camping at the very end. I landed with a solid kick on an individual who had just fired a few shots of his heavy stubber at the oncoming sisters. The man's life ended with a sickening crunch, and the momentum sent his body over the barricade. His companion cursed and came at me with a bayonet. In my heightened state, I saw the blade coming at a snail's pace and noted his speed, or the severe lack of it. You have no chance. With my free hand, I backhanded my attacker's face before his bayonet traveled half the distance needed to reach me, and an appalling sensation from my hand informed me that more than teeth were sent flying. The impact violently rotated the man's head well beyond the turning limit of his neck, and he was already dead before hitting the ground. Sorry, not sorry for showing no mercy. All around me, the cultists had started cracking their weapons at the rushing sisters, and rounds could be seen bouncing off their power armor. Desperate to stop them from shooting my girls, I looked around before landing my sights on the heavy stubber mounted in front of me. Just need to aim and pull the trigger, right? I dropped Mokitar and quickly picked up the massive gun from its mount. A stubber was similar to a .50 caliber heavy machine gun, and while normally it would be unfeasible for a single person to wield the weapon unmounted, I had my transhuman strength to make it work. Pointing the weapon at the nearest cultists, I pulled the trigger of a real firearm for the first time in my life. The stubber roared to life as the recoil started kicking into my hands. My shots landed close but did not hit any targets. My disappointing first salvo, however, had spooked the cultists, and immediately a few of them turned to point their guns at me. While the odds of me dying to small arms fire was slim to none, the sheer desperation of the moment was catching on to me. In time-dilated slow motion, I saw an impending disaster. The sisters were still rushing over as most of the cultists were lining up their shots behind heavy cover, and terrible mental images of Alicia and the sisters being killed due to my inability flashed before my mind. Pressured, something in me snapped. Like in a trance, I aimed to shoot again, but this time my body automatically adjusted to compensate for the recoil observed earlier. My aim went downwards. I took a proper stance, held a tighter grip. My breathing stopped to reduce movement, and headshot. The head of a cultist closest to pulling his trigger on me exploded like an abused watermelon, and the splattering of brain matter stunned his nearby comrades. What the? Before I realized what just happened, my aim had already moved on to the next imminent threats, my finger lightly pressing the trigger each time I felt a lock on my target. Headshot, headshot, and headshot. I watched in equal parts fascination and horror as the heads of my enemies started exploding one after another, like some after-party balloons popping ritual in one of those mini annual dinners from a lifetime ago. Gun blazing with hit after hit, I seemed to instinctively know where my bullets would land like it was the surest thing. Is this how ballistic skill 2+ feels like in real life? An instant later, I was shooting my weapon like an action hero from a classic blockbuster movie, firing a ridiculously large gun at full auto, but somehow consistently hitting my marks. The cultists panicked and cowered for their lives, but there were little places to hide from my terrifying barrage. The barrel of my gun flashed repeatedly. Spent bullet casing rained one after another from my stubber as I rapidly switched between targets, landing most if not all my shots like an aimbot cheater on the hapless heretics. By the time the sisters and the Inquisitor reached me, I had spent almost all the ammunition in my massive gun and single-handedly took out the entire rear guards, leaving them dead or dying on the floor. My lady, Alicia, was the first to reach. She flipped her helmet visor and hurriedly checked on me, anxiety written plainly over her beautiful face. My hearts were pounding, more for being in a heightened state than physical exertion. I am fine. I forced a half smile, my mind still reeling from what had just happened. For a second, I considered reprimanding Alicia for her decision on simply rushing over, but then I recalled how during the Great Crusade era Astartes of the old legions seemed to have the same habit of disregarding everything else when it came to safety issues concerning their father primarchs. I need to consider this tendency of theirs in future events. Seeing that everyone had their eyes on me, I dropped the heavy stubber which had become warm to the touch and picked up Mokitar from the ground. I got the heretic captain right here, I announced with a tone way calmer than what I was experiencing inside. The Inquisitor and the sisters looked at my prisoner and my handiwork, stunned for words. From their minds, I could tell most of them were quite confused as to what just happened. And you said you don't know how to use a gun, Thabarus finally remarked as he surveyed the freshly created slaughterhouse around us. Looking at the scene of butchery that was of my own creation, I felt a deep chill as the Emperor's cold words rang in my head again. You are a no. You back the hell off. I pushed that uneasy notion out of my mind and answered Thabarus. That was the first time in my memory I fired a gun. My comment simply earned another subtle for real look from the silent Inquisitor. Feeling a bit sick of excessive real-life violence at this point, I turned to Alicia while motioning to the far end. I am leaving the rest of them to you. The Palatine snapped to attention and gave her command. Sororitas, forward. With that, the sisters continued pushing forwards to do what they do best. Try leaving one or two alive, Thabarus reminded as the sisters moved past. I watched them go and heaved a sigh of relief. Just as I felt like finally patting my own back for a job well done, a strange sensation came over from my captive. I turned to Mokitar and found him conscious but shivering with more blood trickling down from his mouth and nose. Despite looking exceedingly unwell, Mokitar was staring at me with an inhuman amount of hatred. Even without mind reading, his eyes told me what he was thinking. You will never get anything from me. Something is wrong. I turned to Thabarus, who was already on the task. The Inquisitor quickly removed the heretic's helmet and checked on him. After a brief examination, Thabarus dropped his expert opinion. Suicide pill. Probably a unique cocktail stored in a false tooth and just activated. He will expire soon. There is not much we can do. So he is already a dead man? Feeling let down by the sudden development, I wanted to be sure. Pretty much, Thabarus nodded. I suggest you probe his mind as extensively as possible with his remaining time. His statement sounded doubly grim as weapons started cracking again in the background. Very well, I will see what we can learn, I said while powering up. Again, the nearby psychic souls flared up, but I ignored them. My focus was on this important task at hand. It would be like the mental interrogation I did with the Space Marine, but this time with no consideration of the subject's well-being. I put the dying heretic captain in a sitting position with his back on a barricade before squatting down to touch his forehead. It felt strange. For a man who was at death's door, there was a lot more resistance than expected. Intrigued, I observed the flow of my energy through him and soon discovered the reason. Moving quickly, I took off the metallic chaos symbol that was hanging around the heretic's neck and tossed it aside. That emblem was more than just a trinket. It was providing a level of protection from psychic activity, which made sense. He was assaulting an Imperial Psyker institution after all. It might be the reason why my shadow walk did not work just now. I attempted mind reading by touching Mokitar's forehead again, and this time there was little resistance. Plus hello again, plus I said directly in the heretic leader's mind, and his eyes widened upon hearing my voice in his head. Mokitar seemed to understand my intentions and tried to struggle, but by this point the lethal poison had taken its toll and he was too weak to resist. I looked at him closely. In his eyes my own reflection was staring back, eyes gleaming with golden shine and looking a lot less friendly than usual. Plus you brought this upon yourself. Plus I informed Mokitar before tapping into my powers for an aggressive mind dive. The world went white as I slipped into his synapses. V2 Sich.19 glimpse on evil. Information burst forth like water from a breached dam as the life of a dying chaos worshipper flashed before me. Born in the lower classes and being an immigrant, Mokitar's childhood was an unremarkable blur of drudgery. He spent his early youth constantly brawling in the rough neighborhood and soon discovered he had a knack for fighting. The little supervised boy had no qualms using underhanded techniques to achieve victory. Suddenly, the vision began losing its focus. To compensate, I increased my psychic power output. Refocused again, I saw a young Mokitar joining the army after coming of age. With a talent and taste for fighting, he yearned for more in life and had high hopes. Unfortunately for the future heretic, despite being a cut above the rest, entrenched hierarchies stifled his ascent. For years, Mokitar watched from the sidelines as privileged sons and daughters of aristocrats hogged most if not all the opportunities and promotions. It wasn't fair, not even close. The experience left Mokitar with resentment at the deep-rooted establishment. For many years he festered his hatred in silence. The aftertaste of his emotions were red-hot and bitter, like a lump of burning charcoal. The vision suddenly lost its focus again as the heretic captain's vitality took a nosedive. Alarmed, I steadily increased my power output, straining at what was left of the man's synapses. But it didn't go well. My connection to his collapsing mind had become jarring. The sensation was akin to trying to build a card house inside a decrepit manor during an earthquake. While I could suppress the shaking of the foundation by pumping in more power, the whole place threatened to fall apart at any moment, and there was little time left. Wait, what am I doing? I was supposed to search for critical information, but instead got swept away by the man's dying thoughts. Gritting my teeth, I increased my output further and started asking questions. Plus, how did you people get in here and why attack this place? Plus, Mokitar struggled a bit before answers started to surface from his mind. They entered via tunnels to capture as many psychers as possible, an objective they had completed. Plus, what were you doing when we arrived? Plus, the heretic captain's thought revealed a chilling plan of overloading the primary plasma generator to obliterate the whole place, leaving little to no evidence. Plus, where are you taking the psychers and what are your plans with them? Plus, a feeling of confusion rose from Mokitar's delirious mind. I took it as he genuinely didn't know. Plus, show me your leader, plus. The mere mention of this figure seemed to jolt his dying mind, and he resisted again. In response, I simply overpowered his resistance with more psychically brute force. At first it felt like his mind was breaking for good, but surprisingly a vision eventually appeared. Continuing his story, later in his life Mokitar stumbled onto some forbidden knowledge. As he was secretly researching further into the subject, one night he was approached by an enigmatic figure. With bated breath, I prepared myself to witness this mysterious leader, and was unnerved as an imposing person came into focus. It was a man looking of late middle age, yet he had an energy level that surpassed any youth. Tall and muscular, he was brimming with unnatural power and had an aura as haunting as a moonless night. The mysterious man's hairstyle was a chaotic symphony of curls and waves that seemed to defy all attempts at containment. On his face was a beard as wild as the untamed wilderness, cascading in unruly tangles like the branches of ancient trees. The man's eyes were pools of shadowed mystery that seemed to hold the secrets of ages past, gleaming with an unsettling intensity. Cloaked in mystic robes that billowed like an impending storm on the horizon, his whole appearance screamed, "I am an evil cult leader." In the vision, the figure started to speak. His voice, a deep resonance from the very depths of the earth, carried with it a hypnotic allure that dripped with honeyed venom. From the vision, I could tell spells of persuasion were woven into his words, but they weren't all deceptions. The figure spoke of many things. He spoke of the imperial elites hoarding all the wealth and powers, about the hypocrisy and corruption of the church. The man's statements would warrant him an instant death sentence by any Imperium standard, and yet he spoke of these like that it was the most natural thing. After finishing his speech about the ills of the human empire, the man then revealed the coming of a new era where the light of Astronomicon would cease to shine, and the sector would be plunged into chaos. From this chaos, a new world would be built, a world liberated from the shackles of the Imperium. In this new world, the man promised freedom and fairness where capable people like Mokitar would be needed. There would even be opportunities for power and glory that were unattainable for the less privileged within the current stifling, established order. This guy sure knows how to package himself as a charismatic visionary. His sales pitch was excellent. As for Mokitar, from the resonance in his memory, I could tell his long-held disdain in life tipped the scales, and he easily embraced the heretical path by casting away his oaths to the throne to march towards a new world, a promised world free from the tyranny of the throne. With that, everything began to fade and Mokitar was well and truly on his last legs. I held onto his collapsing synapses and threw in a last question. Plus, what is your leader's name? Plus. There was no reply, only another muted confusion. Plus, what do you call him? Plus. Another scene appeared, breaking and jittery. I could just barely make up Mokitar swearing his new allegiance as he knelt before the man. Master. The vision ended. I found myself back in the grim interior of the Scholastica, my hand still touching the heretic's forehead with Thabarus standing beside me. Mokitar no longer exhibited any signs of life, though eerily his eyes were still open as if longing to see that promised world that never arrived for him. How was it? Thabarus asked softly. I took a long look at the deceased heretic captain. Just a few minutes ago he seemed capable of taking on the whole world, and yet everything was gone from him in the blink of an eye. Standing up, I let out a long breath before answering. It was horrendous. The heretics entered via tunnels and were capturing psychers for some unknown plan. They also planned to overload the plasma generator to destroy any evidence. Most importantly, I saw their leader. He might be that arch-heretic you mentioned. Thabarus' eyes seemed to glint at my answer as he replied. A while ago, I was about to inform you that we received rumors that the cult's supreme leader has recently been active again. This should provide us with some clues to hunt down this bastard. While that was the first time I saw the Inquisitor being excited at something, my immediate concern was how the sisters were doing as the cracking of weapons could still be heard. How is the fight going? I asked. We have them. There is no way out. Let's finish it quickly, Thabarus said and started moving towards the front, leaving me hurrying after him. While walking towards the gunfight, I witnessed the whole situation. The sisters were laying down disciplined fire at the cultists' critically exposed back line, every hit resulting in a gruesome death. Bolters and storm bolters barked relentlessly, with the heavy bolter carried by Sister Lysandra being the loudest of all. Caught between the Duggan security force in the front and with battle sisters on their back, the cultists were being decimated. Shocked, leaderless, and being sandwiched by our pincer attack, their raw emotions of fear and desperation were palpable even from my position, just like their victims not so long ago. Suddenly my mind registered a new vox broadcasting from the enemies. A new voice was speaking with great urgency. Brothers, let's take down as many corpse worshippers as we can. Prepare yourself. Seemed like someone had taken up the leadership role. As I was thinking that, smoke suddenly blossomed in the corridor, quickly obscuring the whole place. Then that same voice ordered with a tune of finality, "With me, for the promised world." Under the cover of smoke, an unknown number of combatants stormed out of their hiding places and charged down the corridor, screaming at the top of their lungs. Startled by the cultists' desperate attempt, I immediately activated thought acceleration before using Auspex to sweep the area, revealing the enemy's locations. That done, I updated the tactical field overlay in a heartbeat, nullifying the smoke cover. The battle sisters, however, held their fire despite being updated with the tactical information, and instead simply let the heretics close in. Just as I was wondering what the sisters were doing, in slow motion, two of the Celestian sisters stood up from their cover, a combi flamer in each of their hands with pilot lights burning. It was then I realized the heretics had made a grave mistake. They were charging one of the most renowned flame users of the Imperium. Time flow resumed just in time for me to witness searing blazes pour forth from the flammers, engulfing the corridor together with the charging cultists. The whole area was immediately filled with the burning scent of promethium. Incredibly, a few cultists emerged from the inferno covered in fire, flailing and screaming as they continued to stumble forward. Looking unimpressed, the sisters swiftly blew them off with near point-blank shots, upping the brutality of this hellish engagement. Amidst screaming death cries, Thabarus and I joined up with the sisters. This fight was finally wrapping up with the cracking of weapons simmering down. I was relieved to see that none of the sisters sustained any major injuries before turning my attention to the aftermath, and what I saw made me wince. In front of us, more than a dozen burnt cultists lay dead or dying on the floor. Amongst a corridor of exploded and charred bodies were a handful of individuals who I could not decide to either be very lucky or otherwise. These people were still alive and moaning painfully, half-cooked with hair and cloth burned off, their skin still sizzling with a sick fatty scent. Further away, the clearing smoke revealed the decimated cultists' main rank, many of them missing huge portions of their bodies that ended in nauseating gory messes, a very common occurrence from a direct bolter hit. Bolter rounds and humans never mix well. As I stood at the edge of the charnel house feeling apprehensive at the carnage, a Vox message came through. Thank the throne, Thorn. Is that you with the battle sisters out there? It was from Kale to Thabaris. Affirmative. Hold your fire, Thabaris said. We are coming out. Don't shoot. All right, do it slowly. The Inquisitor replied before switching his channel to contact all the sisters. Friendlies approaching. Hold fire but stay alert. Shortly after, amongst the fading smoke, I saw movement. Forewarned by Thabaris, the sisters held their weapons in check as the Scholastica survivors left their defensive position. The crowd was moving cautiously, making sure the cultists along the way were neutralized as they crept towards us. As the small crowd came into full view, Thabaris walked out to meet them. I was wondering if I should join the Inquisitor when Alicia and her Celestians abruptly blocked my path, acting like a barrier between me and the newcomers. For a moment, I was about to protest before deciding to allow them their vigilance. The crowd was a mismatched bunch of people, from administrators to security personnel. A late middle-aged man who resembled Sir Sean Connery in his 60s was leading in the front, dressed in a dull Imperial storm coat with some armor pieces. Like Thabaris, he was armed with a bolt pistol. My hunch told me this person must be Kale. I could not help but imagine him to be quite handsome during his prime. Behind the bootleg Sean Connery came a plethora of colorful characters. There was a middle-aged lady with a noble-looking attire right behind Kale, followed by a few individuals looking like personal aides, then two hooded tech priests, and finally an assortment of armed personnels. Finally, both sides met over a hall full of dead cultists, and for a moment no one spoke. Only stares were exchanged. Just as it was starting to get awkward, Kale shattered the silence with a string of hearty laughter. After having everyone's attention, the man holstered his weapon, turned to his colleagues, and spoke in a booming voice, "By the throne. I bet none of you ever foreseen the day when you would be glad to see an Ordo Hereticus Inquisitor visiting unannounced." Huh? For a second, I was surprised by Kale's bold antics before recalling that he and Thabaris were acquaintances. I peeked at the Inquisitor to find that he just seemed slightly amused. While Kale's greeting was unorthodox to say the least, his actions relaxed the tense atmosphere considerably. Just as I was assuming Kale was a goofy character by nature, he suddenly turned all serious, properly formed the Aquila hand salute, and said out loud, "All hail our savior, Thabaris Thorn of the Holy Inquisition." Soon most of the people behind him followed his example and formed their Aquila signs. Thabaris nodded and returned the gesture. "By his will, we miraculously made it in time," the Inquisitor said. "You lot have this other person to thank, though. She contributed the most for your salvation. Before that, is my junior trainee Zaki here with you?" The null boy. Kale turned to the lady behind him. In response, she looked to another one of her aides and ordered with a cultured voice, "Kindly request Agent Z to come forward." Soon a familiar little boy appeared from the crowd, walking stiffly at first, unsure of himself. When the boy saw the grim Inquisitor, his demeanor changed completely and he started running, calling out with joy, "Master Thabaris." The little guy stopped right in front of the looming Inquisitor before properly bowing. "Good to see you, Zaki. I got your acquaintance here who insisted on coming along to see to your well-being," Thabaris said while looking back. After locating me, he gestured for me to come forward. I lightly pushed the somewhat reluctant sisters aside to join him in the front, and immediately my appearance created some confusion. A young maid? What is this girl doing here? I sensed lots of questions from the people we just rescued. My attire was totally out of place within a force of battle sisters with power armor and a battle-ready Inquisitor after all. A thing to note was that while pictures of me active during the last great Civil War battle were quite widespread, the Imperial machinery did a great job on censoring those which featured my face clearly from the public. On that note, I was informed by many ecclesiarchy dignitaries that meeting me in person was a totally different experience from looking at the pictures, and many of them expected me to be taller. So at this point, me being unrecognizable by other people despite being the hottest topic in town was understandable. However, none of those questions were valid to Zaki. In the boy's eyes, he saw his only friend visiting. Visibly excited, the boy looked to Thabaris, and after receiving a nod, he ran to me. "SYRINE." Alicia and her Celestians flinched at the kid for directly addressing me without honorifics, but I couldn't care less. I had already gone before them to receive the little person. "Zaki, I greeted the boy before picking him up, secretly enjoying a fleeting moment of false normalcy like the first time we met. After what I went through to get here, this tiny reward was well-deserved. While the rest of the crowd looked on in confusion, Kale seemed to have figured out my identity, as his facial expression switched from neutral to one of utter surprise. Just then Thabaris spoke again. She is your true savior for today. Without her contribution, things might have gone down very differently. I present to you the living saint candidate, Lady SYRINE. After the Inquisitor dropped his words immediately, the whole place tensed up again. Kale was the first to bow deeply, and many others quickly followed his example. Soon, almost the whole crowd was bowing before me. Looking at the sudden development, Zaki had this dumbfounded look on his childish face. While scenes like this never failed to be equally mortifying and cringe-inducing for me, after playing the part of a saint candidate for 2 days straight at the monastery, I was getting better at handling them. I even developed a detached view of looking at it. These people weren't bowing to me, they were paying respect to the powers I inherited and my place as a proxy of their god's divinity. Nothing personal here, just nod and accept their show of homage. Special thanks to Regulus for always sponsoring my perfect poker face, the real MVP lifesaver. From the sisters I could sense both pride and slight annoyance. Pride for my divinity being acknowledged, annoyance at the two unmoving Mechanicus tech priests who failed to show proper respect. As I understood, members of the Mars priesthood had a very different view on the Emperor's divinity, and they weren't bound by common imperial laws and religious edicts. Please be at ease and rise, I said to the crowd, and could not help but notice the staggering contrast between the sense of serenity carried by my soothing feminine voice and our immediate surroundings of a hall of messy dead bodies. As the crowd was straightening back up, from their back came a sudden clamor followed by a sharp burst of psychic resonance. Alarmed, I looked in that direction and saw an incredible sight. A small orange figure bursting with psychic energy was moving with incredible speed. Right on its tail were 4 individuals clad in that same sinister-looking black armor I saw earlier. The 4 black armored figures were all armed with a spear-like weapon, and even from a distance I could tell that they were not fooling around. Their every stab and jab was fully meant to kill, but the little orange figure was too fast for them, always being a step or two ahead. While Thabaris clicked his tongue at the unexpected event, from the surprised expressions of Kale and his companions, I deduced this could be something serious. Go to Thabaris, I said to Zaki, gently letting him down with a pat on his back. The boy gave me a quick nod before running to his boss. If this was a trap for either of us, the Inquisitor could use a null to increase his odds of survival. Alicia and her Celestians were already forming around me, tensed with weapons raised. It was then the small figure in the distance finally ditched its pursuers and suddenly headed straight for me. Just my luck. A demon host assassin? No time to second-guess. With self-preservation instincts taking over, my thought acceleration instantly went to overdrive as I entered my psychically active state. Going into a defensive posture, I blasted out my halo at full strength in the faint hope of intimidating it. If we survive this, Thabaris would surely give me an earful of, "I told you so," on exposing myself to risks. As the divine radiance filled the space between me and the oncoming blur, for the first time, I got a good look at the small figure. It was not the expected horrible visage of a demon-possessed individual, but that of a terrified, normal-looking human boy. The boy wore an orange jumpsuit that was not dissimilar to those of prison standard issue, and he was screaming via telepathy, "Plus help, plus." His otherworldly plea was heard by none of the sisters surrounding me, and I could tell from their micro-movements they were about to discharge their bolters. V2CH.20 Raising Savior. Due to a series of unforeseen circumstances, a child psyker was about to be killed right in front of me. Not if I can help it. In a split second I decided on my actions. Still experiencing time dilation with my thought acceleration, I labeled the boy as an ally in the field command system. That should mark the boy as a friendly fire hazard sign for all the sisters to see on their helmet's targeting site. I then prepared myself, calling out just as time flowed back to normal from my perspective, infusing power into my words. "Stop. Don't shoot." Miraculously, the battle sisters managed to stop themselves from pulling their triggers by a hair's breadth. The boy, however, flinched at the sight of my halo and the many guns pointing at him, and he slipped with a helpless yelp, falling to the ground. By sheer momentum, the kid skidded a few more feet and ended a small distance away from my position. The four black armored pursuers, however, showed no intention of stopping their attack. They moved onto the fallen boy with weapons raised to kill. Reacting with a swiftness surprising even myself, I leveraged the shoulders of Alicia and another Celestian sister to propel myself over. The sisters gasped in surprise as I passed over them with a quick somersault. I landed right beside the boy, just in time to parry away two spear strikes that were aimed at him with my bare hands. I felt odd sensations from my brief contact with those black spears. These are anti-psyker weapons? Even facing me with my halo up close, these black armored individuals showed no signs of being intimidated, nor were their movements impeded. I could neither sense any emotion nor read their minds, though a quick use of analytica on one of them did yield a result. Human, augmented, black sentinel. They must be some sort of special anti-psyker units of the Scholastica Psychona. Luckily, while they seemed to be above human average in speed and strength, they weren't transhuman nor exceptionally strong. By now the sisters were rushing over and cursing the sentinels for their continuous attack despite my direct intervention. A third spear strike came, again aimed at the boy. I snatched him away from certain death while parrying the spear away, my mind already tracking a fourth attack coming for me from an odd angle. In truth, I had been restraining myself to avoid injuring anyone. Just as I was contemplating on applying more strength to control the situation, a gunshot sounded with a very precise hit that deflected the final spear away. "Cease your insolence. I will kill all of you if you dare to strike at the Saint Candidate again." It was Thabarus, looking furious with a familiar auto pistol in his hand. The Inquisitor had fired a warning shot with the weapon he had offered me not long ago. The bolt pistol would have been overkill. "Sentinels, stand down." Kale added his voice at the same time to defuse the situation. With that, the black sentinels finally stopped their attacks, and I was immediately surrounded by Sisters of Battle with raised weapons. The semi-relaxed atmosphere carefully cultivated by Kale was completely gone by now, replaced by something high-strung and dead serious. That lady with the noble attire, now revealed to be a psyker with her resonance, was even visibly shaking with fear. Wait, why fear? I looked around and found every visible face on the Scholastica crowd was one of either utter shock or abject horror. Why is everyone looking like their life is on the line? I wondered for a moment before remembering my halo was still blasting in full intimidation mode, bathing the whole area with what must have been a suffocating pressure for normal people. After mentally face-palming myself, I turned my halo off and spoke up to de-escalate the situation. "Sisters, lower your weapons." It was a misunderstanding. With that, the tension in the air finally subsided, and we moved away from the edge of starting another fight. Thabarus came over with an apprehensive-looking Zaki right behind him. The Inquisitor took a look at the whimpering boy who was clinging onto me and asked, "What was that all about?" "Is he?" I sensed no taint in him, I said. "He risked his life to approach me and was asking for help." Kale also tried to approach but stopped when two sisters pointed their bolters at him. He quickly raised his hands and spoke in an apologetic tone. "My lady, I am so sorry about what just occurred." Thabarus waved him to stop and asked me, "Do you need a moment?" I nodded. The Inquisitor turned to Kale, taking the man away to ask his own questions. While they were walking away, Neandra voxed in to reveal she had located the other enemy commander in the mess outside. Currently, the assassin was waiting for the Sororitas' convoy to arrive before striking her quarry for maximum disruption. Meanwhile, the rescued boy was still embracing one of my legs with all his might like a drowning person on life-saving driftwood. "You are safe now, please let go," I asked nicely. The boy complied and stood back before staring at me with his puppy-like eyes. "So, why were you asking for help?" I asked. The boy started whimpering again, but at the same time he communicated telepathically. "Plus you. You must be that St. Cassie said everyone was talking about. Help me, I want to go home." Plus? From my point of view, he was both crying and talking at the same time. The experience was jarring. I knelt down, pulled him closer while communicating back with his preferred method. "Plus, calm down. What is your name?" Tell me what is going on. Plus, while we conversed via telepathy, to an outsider, it would look like I was just comforting a crying boy. Plus, I am Gideon, 6 standard years old. You can read minds, right? Like Cassie, you can see memories? Read my mind. You need to see everything, everything. Plus, the boy said and tried to guide my hand to his forehead, but it would not work without cooperation from my end. I had no idea who this Cassie was and never met anyone so willing to share their mind. It felt like the boy was just trying to dump his life on me. Somehow I got a bad feeling about this. His sheer eagerness to share was unnerving. Just what is he trying to show me? Plus, calm down, Gideon. Why do you need me to see your memories? Plus, I asked. Plus, they erased it before, but I got them back. Plus, he exclaimed with streams of tears running down his cheek. Plus, you need to see where my home is to send me back. Will you help? Plus, while the kid was not making perfect sense, something about his story was sounding scarier by the moment, making me reluctant. Plus, see it. See it, please. Plus, he insisted. Plus, all right, I will take a quick peek. Plus, I touched the boy's forehead apprehensively, allowing the process to take place. Then I quickly recoiled and severed the connection. Apart from the boy's mundane life, what I saw briefly cast a new light on this place and sent shivers down my spine. This place was no school. It never was. The Scholastica Psychana was an institutional madhouse where untrained psychers were gathered to either go through the system, die trying, or worse. Suddenly sensing more eyes on me, I looked up at the far end and saw for the first time a host of minor psychers peeking over. The sorry bunch were being guarded by more black sentinels. Some were so skinny their thin necks were showing up like sticks. Metallic collars could clearly be seen on some of them. I looked down at Gideon again, and for the first time properly noticed, just below his orange suit, was the same metallic collar around his neck. I touched the device and realized it was a combination of location tracker and vital signs monitor, with an empty slot for explosives. What about his mentioning of erased memories? I checked on the boy again and found a tiny lump of anomalous energy on his head, looking like what could only be described as patches of faintly glowing strings from my otherworldly perspective. I studied the anomaly carefully, and my instinct told me that this was put in place to disrupt certain functions of his mind. Looking closer at the seal, I found it compromised with a few places subtly breached from the inside out. An understanding came to me. The boy must have overcome it with his power. Now that I think about it, for a young boy of his age, he should be considered ridiculously powerful to exhibit a level of raw power close to that of a sanctioned battle psyker like Fulton. Then everything clicked for me. From what I remembered, the Great Warp Storm cicatrix maledictum happening in this period brought forth many grave problems for the Imperium, one of which was the outbreak of new psykers and the sudden increase in power for many existing ones. Gideon must have experienced a sudden abnormal power growth that broke his mental seal, which explained how he regained his previously suppressed memories. From what I saw from his memories, I knew the boy was terrified of this development and what would happen if people found out. His understanding was that psychers were like untamed monsters, which was the reason why they were treated as such. Another event that had shaken him recently was Zaki's arrival. From Gideon's point of view, the Null Boy was a walking and talking void person, one of the most terrifying things he saw in his life. Ironically, it was only after Gideon saw me embracing Zaki did he wager everything to come forward. For his childish logic, someone who would befriend a monster surely would not mind helping another, and he just really wanted to go home. As I was contemplating on the influx of information, Gideon interrupted my thoughts. Plus, so, can you get me home? Plus, I met the boy's expecting gaze. A dozen of scenarios went through my mind, but none could fulfill his wish. The only acceptable solution then came to my mind, and it was a disturbing one. I eyed the boy again and found myself unable to look at him directly. But this needs to be done. Plus, so you just want to go back to your parents? Plus, I asked. Gideon nodded eagerly with the fire of hope burning in his eyes. Plus, close your eyes. I can bring you home, Plus. The boy had a puzzled look on his face, but did as ordered. Using the same technique I used on Wellmana, I used thought acceleration to quickly construct a virtual world with what was seen in his memories. That done, I guided his synapse into the fabricated reality. He was eager, so the process was easy. Plus, we have arrived. Look around, Plus. Gideon gingerly opened his eyes and his jaw dropped upon witnessing his surroundings. It was the living quarter of his old home, the place looking exactly as he remembered. Plus this is? Plus trembling with disbelief. He looked to me for confirmation. Plus see over there. Plus I pointed to a corner of the living quarter where the boy's parents were smiling warmly to him. Mom, Dad, Gideon called up and was just about to run over to his folks, but stopped himself sharply. He turned to me again and asked for permission. May I go? I smiled and nodded. He exploded with pure joy and ran to his parents, being either too excited or young to question everything. As Gideon embraced his simulated parents, I gently overloaded his mind, putting him to sleep in the dreamscape. The boy slumped over, still hugging both psychic simulacrums. Exiting the psychic simulation, I found myself holding the smiling but unconscious boy. I picked him up, somehow finding the boy heavier than the heavy stubber gun from earlier. I am sorry, kid. Silently, I started walking towards Thabaris and Kale with the Battle Sisters, maintaining their protective circle around me. The two men stopped their discussion when they saw me approaching. The primary objective of their attack, indeed, seems to be capturing as many psychers as possible. The only ones they did not manage to get their hands on are the very young ones and recent arrivals, Thabaris informed me before turning his attention to the boy sleeping in my arms. He asked with a tilt of his head, "What happened here?" I thought for a moment before explaining the situation in layman's terms. His power had outgrown the mental seal placed on him. He remembered his life before here and wanted to go home. Regained memories? The lady who was standing a few steps behind Kale exclaimed in surprise, earning herself a look from everyone. She gulped at being the sudden center of attention, bowed, and expressed her regret. Deepest apology for my sudden outburst, lords and ladies. While the scene was mortifyingly serious on the surface, it was low-key hilarious from my point of view. Here was a regal-looking lady who was clearly in charge of a lot of things. Her attire screamed nobility. Her psycher-augmetics at the back of her scalp were tastefully concealed. She dwarfed my boss from my past life in both air of authority and status, wielded significantly more power, yet at the moment she was bowing like a junior subordinate who had committed some fundamental mistakes. It was, however, not my style to let people hang high and dry, so I quickly dropped some help. Well met. I believe we haven't been properly introduced yet. Why don't we start with that? Counterfeit Sir Sean Connery went first. He put a fist on his chest and introduced himself. I am Kale Sagan, Inquisitorial Overseer recently assigned to this installation. It is an honor. Alicia volunteered next. She formed the sign of Aquila smartly before removing her helmet and tucking it underarm. Alicia Sabatith, Probationary Palatine of the Adepta Sororitas. Then it was the lady's turn. She straightened up as if to regain some composure and did a quick curtsy before introducing herself. I am Dracaena Creed, Vice Prefector. Where is the Lord Prefector? Thabaris asked, straight to the point as per his usual style. No idea. We haven't been able to contact him since the attack began, Kale said. I am also unable to sense his presence, Dracaena remarked. Is he a psyker? I asked, my mind already processing information of the place, trying to locate the man's office. Yes, Lord Prefector Archonsir, specialized in divination with tarot cards, Dracaena replied. It is a shame he did not foresee this attack coming, Thabaris remarked coldly. Dracaena's face flushed with anger for a microsecond before responding. Regrettably, Lord Archonsir has expressed frustration in having difficulties with the art lately. That huge oval-shaped room situated on the 5th floor in the middle of the building. Is that the Lord Prefector's office? I asked after digging my memory for the details of the place. That sounds like it, Kale said. Silently I activated Auspex and sent a wide-range detection wave in the direction of that room. Dracaena was startled upon witnessing my powers. I ignored her reaction. Then the readings came back. My spine chilled upon witnessing the content inside the office. Does Lord Archonsir have a pair of mechanical legs and usually wears a hooded robe? I asked. Yes. That sounds like a proper description of his lordship, Dracaena answered hesitantly, unsure of where I was going. In that room is a corpse fitting that description. I believe Lord Archonsir is dead, I declared after double-checking my readings. Dracaena gasped in horror, covering her mouth with a hand while Kale just silently nodded with a solemn expression. Unfortunate, but we still have many issues on hand. Vice Prefector Dracaena, please explain your surprise from earlier, Thabaris said. eager to get things moving. Of course. Dracaena gave a light bow again before explaining. I am in charge of and have personally inspected the result of every such procedure that was performed here, and I can assure you with the dignity of my family that everything was done with the highest levels of standard and care. So I beg the pardon from you and the revered saint candidate here when I say her statement earlier on the boy being, unfortunately, highly unlikely. Now that was a really roundabout way of saying I was wrong on the subject matter. Thabris, being a non-psyker, was totally out of depth on the subject and did not comment, but I got the boy right here. I approached Dracaena with the sleeping Gideon. While your frankness is appreciated, why not just look at him? With that, Dracaena reluctantly inspected Gideon, and her expression soon changed from stoicness to one of surprise. This can't be, she muttered. Eyes widened in shock. As she began to panic, I found myself able to read her mind easily. From the Lady Vice Prefector's point of view, being proven wrong in front of an Inquisitor and a Saint candidate right after dropping boastful words was as close as it gets for a career suicide, with the honor of her family tagging along for the ride. This unique situation is no fault of yours, I said, trying to give some assurance to Dracaena while receiving a side-eye from Thabris. I could almost read the Inquisitor's mind. Stop simply helping people all the time. Ignoring the hint, I asked Dracaena, can this be fixed? Well, no. We will have to apply the procedure again. The lady started to talk. Her concerns were leaking as I caught glimpses of a few similar cases like this that ended badly with complications. Wait, is the boy fated with a bad ending? Let's get back to the situation at hand. Thabris diverted the subject and turned to me. You mentioned the heretics arrived via tunnels. Any idea where they are? I checked on my readings before replying. They should be located at the northern section of this building, lower level 3 near the laundry area. There are also a few remnant cultists cowering throughout the building. I am updating their positions on the system. Thabris nodded and announced his next course of action. While the captured psychers should be long gone, I am taking the Dominions to check out the tunnels. The Inquisitor then tapped on his data slate as he gave orders. Kale, I am sending you the coordinates. Take your people to apprehend the remaining cultists in these locations. Capturing them alive is preferred, but not necessary. He turned back to me again. The Sororita's convoy should be here soon enough. Don't do anything rash. With that, he led the Dominions and went looking for the tunnels while Kale led his armed men the other way, leaving me accompanied by Zaki, Alicia, and her Celestians with the Scholastica crowd. More violence was coming, a stark contrast to the boy who was sleeping peacefully in my arms. Looking at him, I suddenly felt responsible over Gideon. It was already beyond me to rescue him from his life, but I will be damned if I could at least give him a hand. Back to the issue of this boy. Rather than risking complications with multiple procedures, is it possible to just repair it? I asked Dracaena. Dracaena was flinching a little as she replied. While theoretically possible, it has never been performed. Such a feat requires a level of intense and precise application of psychic power that is beyond our capability. The lady was growing increasingly uncomfortable with the subject. Both her expression and surface thoughts were silently begging me to let the issue slide. Mind if I try? I persisted, determined to give the kid a better chance. We will be honored with your assistance in this matter, Dracaena said, but I could tell in her mind she had already written off Gideon for whatever happened next. I studied this seal again, and my gut feeling told me what I was about to attempt was doable. While I had no prior experience at all on this, it was easy for me to guess what an intact seal was supposed to be like. Manipulating my powers, I started repairing the broken seal by gently pushing all the tiny protruding pieces back to their original places. It took some effort, but it didn't take long before everything was put back into place. Satisfied with the result, it was time to show it to an expert. Does this look right to you? I asked Dracaena, who looked at my work with disbelief before slowly nodding. After receiving confirmation, I reinforced the seal with my power, securing it in place. That should do it. I am entrusting his care to you, I said while handing Gideon to Dracaena. The Lady Vice Prefector hesitated for a second before gingerly receiving the kid. I looked at the crowd at the far end again and recognized Cassie this time, a skinny girl about the same age as Gideon, his secret friend in this place. Our eyes met. I read her fear and trepidation as she quickly looked away, a far cry from the mischievous girl shown in the boy's memory. I then noticed the two Mechanicus tech priests seemed to be doing something peculiar. It felt like they were discussing and looking at things unseen even by my psychic senses. Is that? Noospheric connection. Activated. I opened myself to the network and sure enough, there was an information node here. I logged into the network with my universal administrative credential and started browsing. It was the database of the Scholastica, containing everything from the mundane stuff to the classified. I was still glancing at the massive amount of information when my mind registered Flameraven's return, this time well aware of the gunship's Vox boosting capability. By dipping my consciousness into the Vox network, I could even eavesdrop into the various communications between Imperial forces within its coverage. I was soon listening to a Vox call between Alicia and a Sister Superior Lucia, who had arrived with Wellmana, Malin, and 3 squads of retributors. I was reminded of the pending battle for the outer perimeter. While there was little I could do for the Psychers here, I could probably cut down our casualties for the incoming fight. Save those I can save. Deciding on my action, I logged off from the noospheric network and noticed the 2 tech priests were looking straight at me. Both of them were motionless, still as statues. Well, don't mind me. Lady Dracaena, I addressed the vice prefector to announce my intention. It was nice meeting you. I am heading to the ground floor. After receiving a hasty nod from the lady, I turned to my little friend. Zaki, I got to go. You are as busy as Master Thabarus, Zaki said and posed for a hug, a luxury for him. I obliged the little fellow with a light hug and bid him farewell. Take care. With that done, I turned to Alicia. Let's get back. As you command, the Palatine replied reverently. Turning my back on the Scholastica crowd, I started walking. The truth was I simply wanted to leave this suffocating and sorry place as soon as possible. Sisters, I am going to pick up my pace. Please keep up. I increased my speed, my mind already working with many possible stratagems to be used in the upcoming fight. There were many things I could do to increase our advantage. I could deploy the retributors to form a kill zone before imitating Makatar to issue a hasty order of retreat, luring all the cultists into a death trap. I could coordinate with Neandra, making sure her target would scream and broadcast that moment to all the cultists as she struck. I could also just simulate Makatar's death scream and broadcast it to the cultists' general Vox channel, which would be mighty disruptive. Or I could do all 3. Imagine hearing the death screams of both your highest-ranking commanders as you retreat into a hail of heavy bolter fire with ranks of battle sisters sandwiching from the back. In fact, at this point, I was pretty confident about just going in on my own, grabbing a gun and ending all of them personally, Matrix style. They are just humans with autoguns. They have no chance. After conducting a strafing run to clear off some cultists on the Scholastica rooftop, Flameraven again landed with a new strike force. Stepping off from the gunship, Wellmana was reminded of the fact she was no frontliner and almost gagged at the sight and smell of the place. While she could tell Malin was as uncomfortable as herself when confronted with messy human remains resulting from heavy bolter attacks, the same could not be said of Sister Superior Liana, who was the leader of the new forward teams. Sister Liana did not even flinch at the bloody scene as she quickly made contact with Palatine Alicia. After receiving her orders, Liana and her 3 squads of retributors simply stepped over the mess and went straight downstairs, leaving the scholar and the preacher to catch up to the heavily armed battle sisters. Upon reaching the ground floor, Wellmana was surprised to see a squad of battle sisters, led by a Sister Veryen guarding a choke point. After a quick discussion, Squad Veryen was relieved to escort Wellmana and Malin to the Palatine's position. So the group went deeper into the building and came across many deceased cultists with bolter wounds. Wellmana was relieved to never come across a martyred sister, while Malin praised the holy work done in the name of righteous retribution. Halfway through, the group suddenly received a vox from the Holy Daughter herself. Sister Veryen, Wellmana, Malin, be advised, we are heading towards your position. As the battle sisters held their position and weapons in check, SYRINE appeared from the gloomy corridor and approached with astonishing speed. Behind her came Palatine Alicia and her Celestians, struggling to keep pace despite having the aid of motion-amplifying power armor. Stopping before the astonished group like she wasn't dashing at a speed of more than 50 kilometers per hour just a moment ago, SYRINE casually said, "We are done here. There are other cultists to deal with outside. Let's go." While the Holy Daughter had looked and acted no different than usual, Wellmana thought she detected a strange hint of melancholy from her mistress. That notion, however, was quickly forgotten by the scholar as she realized she would soon witness SYRINE personally taking command of a battle for the first time to crush the heretics. The news of the Chaos Cult's audacious attack would later send shockwaves through the capital city, but what stunned the citizens even more was the remarkable speed with which the large-scale assault was quelled by the authorities. The decisive counter-strike operation was widely rumored to be led by none other than the Saint Candidate herself, and the Sororitas suffered not a single casualty that day. V2CH.21 Strange Night. It was midnight, and the crowd of pilgrims at the monastery gate had definitely grown larger. Standing by my room's window, I absently observed the crowd below while recalling my day. What a day! I commanded an actual army for the first time ever. The experience of so many ranks of sororitas obeying my will like the back of my hand was both mesmerizing and intoxicating. The sights and sounds of more than 10 heavy bolters firing at the same time brought back the nostalgic feeling of a massive game of Dawn of War. My initial gateway game into the Grimdark universe. I got a taste of what it meant to be wielding power and caught a glimpse on why some people lost themselves to its allure. I managed to totally overcome the cultists with many stratagems and pull off a win with no casualties on our side. While many celebrated the result as a remarkable feat bordering a miracle, in hindsight I knew we had many advantages stacked against the cultists. Strategically speaking, there was no sugar-coating it. While on the surface it looked like a crushing victory for us, the enemies had long achieved their primary objective before we arrived. We were merely stomping on their disposable units and avoided further disasters. As for Thabris' pursuit, as predicted, the Inquisitors soon ran into literal dead ends, and the collapsed tunnels would take time to be cleared. Eventually, the place was swarming with hordes of Imperial reinforcements. A sea of Magistratum officers supported by more Arbites arrived. Then 2 companies of stormtroopers from the Planetary Defense Force belatedly showed up. My presence had become more of a hindrance for the people around me to work, so I had to leave. Thabris held a small debriefing session with the Sisters of the initial strike team, in which he dropped a strict gag order forbidding anyone from leaking information about my powers, before I returned to the monastery with Malin, Wellmana, Alicia, and her retinue via Flameraven. While on the way back, I observed Malin switching on her personal communicator after receiving permission from Tasia. The preacher was soon flooded with inquiries from important people of the church. Wellmana likewise was reporting to Canoness Diadina. With my superhuman hearing, I was picking up their hushed conversations, even when it was not my intention to snoop on them. Yes, she took command. It was flawless. It was miraculous. I will file a report as soon as... I forced myself to tune out their conversations and started watching the news channels with a random data slate that was connected to the information network. There was already much news of the incident with unconfirmed reports about my involvement. Everything I do publicly is headline-worthy. That notion was still quite hard for my mind to grasp even when it happened right before my eyes. After we returned to the monastery, I spent some time working on the portrait of the cult leader, faithfully replicating the arch-heretic's visage before passing it to Herlindia. The throne agent was still being swamped with work coordinating various Imperial agencies when I passed her the lifelike digital portrait. I guessed a lot of people would be working overtime today. In the evening, Canoness Diadina finally came back with a huge Sororitas force from her heretic purging campaign. After receiving Wellmanua's consultation on matters of protocols, I joined the sisters to welcome the returning expeditionary force. We waited at the bottom of the massive flight of marble stairs that led to the great doors of the fortress monastery. Before long, an armada of Sororitas vehicles came into view, a familiar Rhino command tank leading at the forefront. The massive convoy scattered the pilgrims as they passed through the main gate into the monastery compound. The Canoness transport stopped right before me, and out stepped Diadina, Markila, and a squad of Celestian sacrosancts with their signature large shields. It had been a while since I last saw the Canoness and the Celestian Superior, both of them looking good despite having been through what must have been an exhausting campaign. Our eyes met and Diadina smiled. She stood still and waited for the hundreds of battle sisters to disembark. When most of the returned sisters had gotten off their ride, Diadina moved until she was right in front of me. Without a word, the Canoness knelt down, prompting the whole expeditionary force to do the same. I could do nothing but graciously accept their homage. The crowd of pilgrims at the monastery perimeter fence erupted into thunderous cheers as Daidainoa's action had indirectly confirmed my identity. Despite the distance, many of them had been camping for days in hope of catching a glimpse of me. It wasn't all happy reunion and glory, though, as I noted the many caskets of martyred sisters that returned with the expeditionary force. Of course, later that night, I ended up joining the sororitas' wake for their fallen. While the sisters were busy praying for their deceased, right beneath us, many cultists captured from the Scholastica were being interrogated in the dungeon. I felt the surge of psychic powers being used to extract information, a palpable emotion of despair and pain ebbing from below. Psykers and their psychic powers were a necessity for the existence of the Imperium. Without them, faster-than-light travel and messaging that kept the Empire in one piece would not be possible with their current level of technology. Yet the Imperium's treatment towards the average psyker was appalling. Then again, except for the ultra-privileged few, the Imperium of Man usually treated everyone with equal disdain. I remembered a popular joke in the wargaming circle about a mother walking into a hobby shop with her young son who wished to get into the wargaming hobby of the Grimdark universe. After listening to the sales clerk who tried his best to explain the many factions involved, the mother asked the key question: "So who are the good guys?" There were no real good guys here, just various levels of evil and corruption. In most cases, the Imperium was as oppressive, if not worse, than many of the horrors lurking in this unforgiving world. Due to my special condition, I was being treated well enough to develop a blind spot for that fact, but witnessing how the psychers were faring at the Scholastica knocked some sense back into me. Back to the wake, being the focus of attention and not knowing what to do. I had been sitting still throughout the whole session, only nodding and gesturing when necessary like a dignified VIP. Staying totally motionless with this body was easy. Transhuman like space marines were famously known for their unmoving honor guards who could stay as still as statues for many hours. I imagined this was quite a feat for a normal human, for if I had a mortal body, the eventual creeping muscle cramps would have crippled me. Throughout the session, I also maintained a neutral face and kept my sight forwards despite noticing each and every peek from the crowd that came my way. Though none had dared to directly make the request, it was on most of the sisters' minds on their fervent wish to see the Emperor's light again. Truth be told, by this point I was beginning to feel the exploitative nature of my halo and loathed the notion of spamming it. I was, however, not about to cheap out on paying a token of respect for the people who had paid the ultimate price for their belief. The psychic light show cost me nothing after all. Near the end of the wake session, I silently unleashed my halo at the height of the sisters' prayer as a final tribute. As the divine golden light filled the praying hall, to everyone's amazement, a host of astral doves manifested just like last time at the monastery gate. The flock of angelic birds, pure white in color and shimmering with a divine glow, gracefully flew a few laps around the edge of my halo before ascending towards the domed ceiling. Just as the birds were about to reach the many portraits of saints painted on the roof, they faded from reality and disappeared without a trace. The whole short event was both enchantingly beautiful and haunting, almost directly implicating the sisters' souls departing to a higher realm. Malin and many of the sisters who were present were moved to tears, while many more were convinced it was a sign of approval from Biggie himself. Whatever the case, the phenomena baffled me. I certainly wasn't controlling these avian apparitions. Just what are these astral birds? After the wake was over, I had a meeting with Daidaina and her palatines. The canoness reported her campaign to me like I was her direct superior. I did little, just acted like a good listener. Then I recalled that today's operation was nearly compromised due to my zero proficiency in handling firearms. Seizing the moment, I requested an introductory course on weapon usage to be arranged for me following tomorrow morning's pending meeting with Thabaris. My request caught everyone off guard, but it was promptly approved. By the time we were done, it was late in the night. I retreated back to my room but could not sleep, and ended up just looking out from my windows while contemplating today's events. My mind wandered from one thing to another, but somehow eventually settled on looking into those birds. Thinking back, these mysterious avians seemed to appear when the crowd around me was in a high emotional state. The question now was, could I reproduce the phenomenon on my own? Unleashing my halo, I started experimenting. First, I tried various intensities, but no birds appeared. Something was missing, something emotional or intense in nature. Then an idea came to me. I tried again, but this time slowly released my powers and then distorting it like pinching a running water hose to increase its pressure. I let the energy grind on its own while mentally picturing a bird to appear. Then it happened. At the very edge where the energy was concentrated at its highest, a faint mist materialized and coalesced into a defined spectral dove that started flying around. The dove shimmered with a subtle luminescence, like moonlight dancing on water with gentle hues of gold and silver. Its feathers were translucent yet radiant, and seemed to capture the light around it, creating an otherworldly aura. The bird's wings, though delicate in appearance, moved with a grace that belied their spectral nature, causing ripples in the air with each beat. I stretched out a hand while mentally beckoning it. To my surprise, it seemed to understand my wordless request and flew over. As it settled on my hand, I could feel its ethereal weight, light yet substantial enough to be palpable. I examined the unreal bird on my palm. Despite its intangible nature, the creature, which seemingly was made entirely of light, exuded a physical presence that was undeniable. Its beady eyes that seemed to hold a depth of understanding beyond mortal comprehension looked around with genuine curiosity. After a while, it extended its wings, and with a soft coo flew away before disappearing into the thin air. It was like magic. I couldn't help but marvel at the lifelike wonder and the nature of its existence. By then it was well past midnight. Despite being up and busy the whole day, I was not sleepy at all. I didn't need much sleep to begin with, and today's many events had kept my mind restless, needing some distractions and to kill time. I eventually decided to go to the library to catch up with my studies. After a brief scouting with astral projection to confirm that the path was clear, I proceeded to the library. With my superhuman level senses plus the shroud ability, avoiding people was easy peasy. As for the few security picked recorders at key locations, I simply set them looping on the empty hallways while passing through their fields of view. This ghosting business felt strangely familiar and natural, like I had done it all my life. Soon I reached the closed library with its huge, ornate doors barring my entry. A slight push on the unmoving door confirmed the place was locked up, and it was not a digital lock which I could easily bypass. Using short-range Auspex, I managed to get a clear three-dimensional view on the intricate lock mechanism. Then the transcendent intelligence residing in me simply took over. So, I just need to move these parts. Suddenly, a well-practiced motion came out of nowhere as I discharged a minuscule amount of my power that moved the locking mechanism into the open position and unlocked the massive door. What the telekinesis? Now that I think about it, written in one of the many rulebooks, it was mentioned Psyker in this universe were mostly using a few main branches of power disciplines. What were they again? Biomancy for warp lightning discharge and body strengthening. Divination to look into the future. Pyromancy for creating warp fire. Telekinesis for moving things. And telepathy for distant communication. Note to self, I gotta take further lessons from the Psykers. Right before opening the door, I felt Solace's presence due to close proximity. My servo skull was left in the library in my haste to depart for the mission today. Just to make sure, I remotely accessed Solace's sensors to confirm the coast was clear within the library. Through its eyes, I saw not a single soul in sight, and all the cherubs were at their resting stations. Silently, I opened the door and stepped inside, not bothering to switch on the light as my eyes could see just fine. Walking in the darkness like this somehow reminded me of the Night Lords, one of the original bad guy Space Marine legions infamous for their war crimes. Those notorious bastards liked to stick to the shadows because their homeworld was perpetually dark without a shining sun. I sat down at a spot before awakening my favorite cherub. Ada 55, bring me the next 10 books on my list. Complying. The cyborg baby stirred and moved to work, flipping its non-functional wings to fetch my books on the list. As the homunculus delivered my first book, it occurred to me to cover my tracks. Ada 55, set timer countdown for 6 standard hours. Upon finishing countdown, erase all activity logs since midnight. Acknowledged. It replied while flying away to get the next book. I started reading in the quiet darkness. The world appeared to me in a tranquil grayness, my transhuman eyesight easily picking up the words from the pages in the dim light. You might think with superhuman reading one could easily chew through a whole library's contents, but the truth was depressing. A casual calculation informed me that even if I could read an average of 2,000 books a day, it would take 3 standard years to go through this collection. Too slow. This was just too slow. I sighed internally while putting down my book. I remembered something about SYRINE being designed to be an administrator for a region of the Imperium. Shouldn't she have a built-in ability for mass information assimilation? As I mused, a line of words appeared in my vision. Activate Dominus Informationes? Yes/no. Lord of Information? I was flabbergasted. Just how many abilities does this girl have? Strangely, I noticed the words were not as clear-cut as other previously shown abilities. Its opacity had a never-seen-before translucent quality to it. Still, these auto-aids had never failed me before. Besides, it was either this or be stuck reading for years. Seeing no reason to hesitate, I confidently selected yes from the option. As the ability was activated, I became psychically active and my power was released to the surroundings. Before long, strange things started happening. I felt my senses being stretched and spread out. Then, like a thin veil, my consciousness slowly seeped into all the nearby printed materials. Like a miracle, pages after pages of information started appearing directly into my mind. Oh, this is what I was talking about. The process started slowly at first before picking up speed. First, the pages flashed by the dozens. Then it sped up and pushed into the hundreds. Before I knew it, thousands of pages worth of information were smashing into my mind. The influx of data hit me like a tidal wave. Countless pages of text, pictures, and graphs flashed before my eyes as the onslaught of ultra-dense knowledge continuously poured in, straining even my superhuman mind. I blinked rapidly, trying to focus as the data load became overwhelming. It felt like trying to drink a lake with one gulp. My twin hearts raced, and my breathing quickened. I tried to make sense of it all but couldn't keep up. My mind had hit a saturation point, and everything seemed to swirl into a chaotic mess. My thoughts became disjointed. My mind is breaking apart. Panic set in as I struggled to regain control. My head throbbed with a numbing sensation and my vision blurred. I felt like my consciousness was being torn apart by the sheer volume of information bombardment. I tried to slow down, to take deep breaths, but it was futile. I was drowning in a sea of information. It was an overload that I hadn't anticipated. Disoriented and overwhelmed. In a desperate attempt to regain control, I bit my lower lips. The semi-resemblance of physical pain brought the sense of having a body back, and from there I tried to switch off my powers, but then something popped. Everything went black. It was the dead of the night. I found myself walking without shoes on a sandy beach. I had no recollection of how I got here, and this disorientating sensation was eerily familiar. I looked into the darkness in front of me, somehow half expecting to see a bewitching girl with platinum hair appearing out of nowhere. But there was no one around. I was alone. Looking up, the cloudless night sky was covered with endless, unblinking stars of unrecognizable constellations. I had never seen this many stars before. It reminded me of a scientific fact about the universe having more stars than all the sand on all beaches around the world combined. Enthralled, I lost myself in the scenery when an unknown light flashed me from behind. I looked back, found the source of illumination to be a lighthouse, and that I was standing on the beach of an island, so tiny it felt surreal. The lighthouse had an unknown source of white light that was turning lazily, bringing illumination to the muted darkness. As the beam of light cut into the unnatural darkness, it revealed the sea to be nearby. I walked towards the water and found it to be unnaturally calm. So calm it was unnerving. The huge body of dark water produced no waves. Its surface was utterly still, like a titanic piece of mirror that stretched to the horizon. I looked down and saw my own reflection. Strangely, I could not pick up any details of my face. It was simply a patch of blurriness flanked by shoulder-length platinum straight hair. Why can't I see myself? Puzzled by what I was seeing, I approached the water. Bizarrely, no matter how close I got, my reflection remained inscrutable. It simply morphed from one blurry form to another and never settled into focus. Intrigued, I continued my approach until a sudden gurgling croak from above broke the serenity and my stupor. I turned to the source of sound, just in time to catch a glimpse of what must have been a large bird in the night sky that melted into the darkness. Looking down, I was shocked to find myself chest deep in the water. Never go deep into the water. An important lesson I learned from somewhere was jumping at me, but its origin escaped my disoriented mind. I moved, wanting to get back to the beach quickly. The silent sea abruptly exploded with activity. Countless small and strange creatures that were vaguely fish-like jumped out from the water in a frenzy of movement. It was like they were swimming for their lives, escaping from something. The air itself changed. The eerie sense of stillness from before vanished without a trace as wild wind started howling, sending my hair fluttering. Ominously thick clouds appeared from nowhere over the night sky, obscuring the stars. Then to my horror, I sensed something truly massive stirring in the deeper water, and at the same time a faintly familiar inhuman voice called to me. "You won't escape me forever." The pure maliciousness in its tone sent shivers down my spine. Just then a huge bulge of water started forming a distance away. Something was rising from the deep, pushing all the water before it. My jaw fell slack at the sight of rising water that was surging towards me. Whatever it was huge. Its size was hinted at by the sheer volume of displaced water amounting to a small hill. "Anathema's daughter, face me." It called to me again. Its words, however, woke something in me, and I realized none of this was real. I just need to get out of the water. My eyes snapped open and I found myself back in the library, gasping for air. For the first time, I felt groggy in this apex transhuman body. The impact from psychic feedback still lingered and, wait, is someone there? Instinct screaming. My head turned towards a direction where I sensed something. Alarmingly, even with my superhuman senses, I could not determine if the faintly perceived presence was real or imaginary. Straining my sight at the gloom, I saw a hint of movement at the very edge of a huge bookshelf. Bolting towards the spot, my mind registered my own action only after I arrived at the place a heartbeat later. No one was there, only the faintest trace of what could have been a psychic resonance and the peculiar hint of a falling feather. In the solitary darkness of the library, it took a while for me to realize that I was shivering, still shaken by the experience. Was I attacked? Or am I losing my mind? V2CH.22 Security Meeting. The serenity of early morning was broken by an extra number of gunships patrolling over the monastery. A lot of important people had arrived for a meeting called by Thabarus. While the notion of holding a high-level meeting about the planet's security in a Sororitas monastery was kinda weird, my guess was that my presence had shifted the center of power. Escorted by Wellmana towards the designated meeting room, I was feeling off despite having just bathed and put on a fresh set of white robes. I couldn't sleep since returning from the library and just got off from a Vox call with Thabarus. The Inquisitor sounded happy with my portrait work of the arch-heretic and asked a few questions about it. Unfortunately, other than the man's appearance, the way he sounded, plus the moniker of Master, I had little to offer. On the side note, I was suffering from a light headache. It was noteworthy on its own since this body rarely if ever experienced illness. It appeared to be a consequence of using that power in the library. The spell worked. I now had the whole library collection at the back of my mind and could summon the material at will. It was like having a private Wikipedia inside my head, and will need some time getting used to. While it felt strange and awesome to have instant access to so much information, most of my attention was spent contemplating the vision that had left me shaken. That greater demon is still holding a grudge against me? This was no joking matter. Without access to severe methods and resources, demons in this universe could not be truly killed. Destruction of their body in the physical world merely sent their essence back to the warp, where they were free to regain strength and plot their revenge. In the official lore, a captain of the Grey Knights, the super-secretive space marines that specializes in anti-demon warfare, had pissed off a powerful greater demon, and it haunted the poor guy for hundreds of years despite it being defeated and slain multiple times. I was zoning out and Wellmana seemed to notice it. She started shooting discreet, concerned glances at me. I knew from her thoughts she was worried if I was somehow being upset by the bloody events at the Scholastica. In truth, my greater concern lay in the swiftness with which I felt indifference towards the recent carnage. The old me would have still been crapping myself with yesterday's brutality, which I had both witnessed and dished out in equal measure, but it took the hint of a vengeful greater demon to get me alarmed. It felt like a fundamental part of what made me as a person was changing, and that notion was deeply disturbing. We passed through many security checkpoints and eventually reached the designated meeting room. The battle sisters guarding the entrance bowed and opened the heavy set of doors for us. Being the center of attention was a lot of hassle. Arriving too early would put pressure on the attendees, while on the flip side coming late might be perceived as being arrogant. Thanks to Wellmanua's meticulous tracking of the happenings, the timing of my arrival was perfect as the last of the other VIPs had just arrived not long ago. Proper observance of protocol is just tedious. I took a look at the grand meeting room and was jolted by the sheer prestige of the gathered crowd. Seated in the center of the room was Thabarus, and judging by his extra ruggedness, the Inquisitor had not slept since yesterday. Primaris Psyker Yehai was standing on his left, while to his right stood Interrogator Amael, Herlindia's not-so-secret boyfriend, who I had not seen for a while. Fully geared up in a form-fitting tactical outfit and looking sharp, the Interrogator was the portrait of a dashing protagonist that would fit perfectly as a main character. Herlindia herself was standing with Neandra a few steps behind the Inquisitor. Sitting across Thabarus was the planetary governor Catalina herself in the flesh. Surrounded by her advisors, the governor looked stunning in her tailor-fitted, long-sleeved, deep purple jacket that was adorned with intricate golden embroidery of ornate patterns. Completing her classy look was a statement collar necklace featuring her house crest made with precious gems and metals. Catalina was probably not a morning person. She appeared slightly tired and seemed to be doing her best to suppress a yawn. Upon seeing my entrance, however, she immediately straightened up. Seated beside the governor was Lord General Kruber, an elderly gentleman who was the current supreme commander of the Planetary Defense Force. The man looked to be quite the character with his uptight uniform decorated with rows of medals, and on his hawkish face was a finely groomed but graying imperial mustache. Also seated was another gentleman who wore an elaborate Arbeits uniform. If my hunch was correct, he must be the Arbeits marshal who had called Thabarus to apologize for the shooting incident. Across the marshal sat a lady with her back against me. From the uniforms of people around her, I guessed she must be the current head of Magistratum, basically the top cop of the planet's local law enforcement. Then there was the venue's host, Diadina herself, who was seated between the Inquisitor and the governor. The hooded canoness was flanked by Celisa and Helenta, two of her more senior palatines. The sisters formed the only power-armored figures in the room. Sitting across from the sisters with his back to me was Archdeacon Ricine, leader of the ecclesiastical High Hat group. Since the cardinal had yet to return, Ricine was for the moment the top religious figure on the planet. Malin was standing amongst the advisors behind him. The sole Mechanicus representative was Muggos Balpratus. The tech priest had but a servo skull by his side. Except for the Muggos, who was the odd one out, every seated individual had a few advisors, or members of retinue, standing close to them. It would not be an understatement to say the combined power and influence of people here could decide the fate of the planet. Unlike me, everyone present was more appropriately dressed for the occasion. White robes 24/7. What was I thinking, and why did Wellmana say nothing? While I was contemplating my fashion predicament, my entrance had been noted by the group of elites. As one, every seated person in the room stood up, then all the people in the room bowed to me. Forget about the wardrobe. I must say something. Despite having thought acceleration and all the extra knowledge inside my head, nothing appropriate came to mind. A heartbeat later, I decided a simple approach was the best. Just treat this like an early office meeting. The only part that needed getting used to was the notion that I was the big shot. "Good morning," I said with a smile and solicited back a chorus of replies. Under everyone's watchful gaze, I walked towards an empty seat that was obviously meant for me and quietly sat down. I was seated to Thabarus' right side, and to my right was Diadina. After everyone settled down, Thabarus spoke up. "By the grace of the Golden Throne, I thank you all for coming on such short notice. This is not a social event, so I will cut short on the pleasantries. Marshal Gallioner, Grand Magister Abini, meet Lady SYRINE, the living saint candidate." I exchanged glances and nodded with both of them. Gallioner was quite imposing, muscular with a large squarish jaw that brandished a goatee. The man's left eye was a bionic replacement, a glowing blue orb. Abini was a dark-skinned lady with a stern demeanor. She reminded me of the no-nonsense disciplinary aunt archetype. Unlike the few true blue-blooded aristocrats present, she exuded a sense of groundedness, devoid of any airs of nobility in the way she carried herself. While both had maintained their impassive facade, their inner reaction of meeting me for the first time was vastly different. Gallioner's surface thoughts revealed he was still grateful for me going easy on them, while Abini was awestruck. I could tell that much with how her breathing patterns suddenly deepened. Both her eye pupils had dilated considerably, and her surface thoughts were a blank wash of ecstatic emotions. "We are starting now," Fabris declared. "If you would excuse me, yesterday was quite draining, so I will let Interrogator Amail brief you all on my behalf." The meeting commenced, and the lights were dimmed before they turned on the holographic projector in the middle of the table, bathing everyone's face in colors mirroring the projections. It was like a PowerPoint presentation, but with three-dimensional images floating in the air instead of on a boring white screen. Amail started his briefing, the holographic images changing as he gave a summary to all the VIPs. Yesterday, more than 100 armed cultists had taken part in the assault of the Scholastica Psychona at about lunchtime. Foul sorceries were attributed to how the Chaos Worshippers were able to bypass the Scholastica's many defenses that were both physical and psychic in nature. It also explained how they were able to dig their way in undetected. By estimations, it must have taken them days of digging to breach the place, and the attack came as a complete surprise. Fortunately, security of the facility had just been buffed up recently, but even so they barely held their ground, resulting in a sizable number of untrained psychers being captured, their current whereabouts unknown. Lord Prefector Archonsur, master of the Scholastica, was found dead inside his office with his head crushed. The cause of death was determined to be a powerful psychic attack, resulting in catastrophic cranial trauma. Archonsur's time of death was pinpointed to be just before the assault began. "Lords and ladies, I have a question," Abini voiced with a raised hand. If the interrogator was annoyed, he showed no sign. Instead, he beckoned her to speak. "Forgive my ignorance, but I don't understand why we can't track down the captured psychers," asked Abini as she threw a quick glance at Yahai. "From my understanding, a large group of untrained psychers should not be difficult to locate, considering we have access to skilled specialists." "A logical question, Grand Magister Abini," Amail replied. "If you are referring to the brightness of their souls that should be easy for our psychers to pick up, it would appear to be the case on paper." At this point, I could see some of the attendees perking up on this topic, no doubt having the same question on their minds. Amail's expression darkened as he continued. "Unfortunately, there are ways the heretics can overcome this. Beside the method of using psychic dampening material to shield the prisoners, there are other more unscrupulous and outright heretical methods to achieve the result." Now that he mentioned it, I had seen one of those methods in a comic. It involved utilizing nulls like Zaki as living anti-psychic field generators. Since the null in question just needed to be alive for the purpose, to cut down chances of complications, it was not uncommon for the unlucky person to be either heavily drugged or outright comatose, to be used like a living instrument. In said comic, a null was comatose with all limbs cut off before being embedded inside a cargo container with minimal life support to shield an important shipment psychic signature. I suddenly had a horrible notion and wondered if that could be the fate awaiting Zaki if we did not intervene. Contemplating such a possibility made me wince, and my hands involuntarily clenched into fists. Amail did not elaborate further on the terrible subject and started providing numbers for the counter-strike operation. About 100 heavily armed cultists were present at the facility when the Inquisition-led Sororita's counter-strike operation commenced. Fewer than 20 cultists had survived the clash, while the Sororitas suffered but a few injuries. At the moment, they were being held in the dungeon right below us. Marshal Gallioner could not hide his astonishment about the final tally. "No casualties? Remarkable. Canoness Diadina, allow me to compliment your order on this achievement." Diadina responded courteously, "Thank you, Marshal. But I must attribute this incredible feat to both the God Emperor's blessing and Lady SYRINE's leadership. She was the one commanding in the front yesterday." Her statement turned the whole room's attention to me, something I wasn't too pleased about. Thinking fast, I threw out counter-compliments like a fighter jet throwing decoy flares to deflect the heat. I might have contributed my part. This result would not be possible without the exceptional abilities of the Battle Sisters and the combined effort of other agencies like the Arbites and Magistratum. The reactions of the crowd were interesting. Most were impressed by my humbleness, while some were stunned by the fact I even took part in the operation. A few were quietly doubting if the tally was exaggerated. A totally one-sided feat like that would usually involve unleashing Astartes on unsuspecting targets. A male pulled a dry cough, and we continued, the projection changing to show the heads of two individuals in three-dimensional images, both spinning slowly in the air. One of them was the deceased Mokatar, the other I didn't recognize. These two were the top heretic commanders on site. One chose to end his life by ingesting a lethal poison upon capture, while the other sustained injuries during action and is presently in critical condition. Alarmingly, both men had served in the Planetary Defense Force. We are currently looking into their records to determine. Unforgivable, Lord General Kruber interrupted. I am deeply ashamed by the actions of these individuals. By the Golden Throne, I swear you have the full cooperation from the entire Planetary Defense Force for your investigations in this matter. The man was clearly upset. He was breathing heavily, his signature mustache trembling with barely concealed boiling anger. While having traitors come out from your organization was a big deal, personally I won't put all the blame on him, as the army was usually one of the first places a chaos cult would infiltrate. And with an organization that big, you were bound to find some people who would be willing to switch sides. The ironic part for me was that the second guy had survived despite initially being ordered to be eliminated by Thabris himself. Back then the cultists were so overwhelmed by us. Neandra found the time to reconfirm her order as the heretic commander was dying in his own pool of blood. The Inquisition welcomes your declaration and will remember your promise, Lord General, a male answered politely before continuing. Next, we have one major breakthrough in our efforts against these heretics. In the next instance, my handiwork, the three-dimensional portrait of the mysterious arch-heretic, appeared on the holographic projection. From information recently acquired, we believe this individual to be the supreme leader of all the chaos cults operating in Nusquam. A male dropped the bombshell flatly. The room went quiet, and a curious change in the air could be perceived. Time slowed down as my senses tuned up. Objects became sharper, colors appeared more vibrant, and sounds became clearer. It took a moment for me to realize my body had undergone a fight or flight response to a potential threat nearby. It was Neandra. While the Imperial assassin didn't move at all, I sensed her subtle readiness to pounce. It took another heartbeat for me to conclude she was not aiming at me, but rather she was locking down her attention to all the people in the room. Meanwhile, Yahai had silently increased her power circulation. The otherworldly throbbing of her psychic might was unmistakable. At the same time, Thabris had gone full sinister Gendo Ikari mode. He even completed the act with the infamous conspiratorial finger-tinting pose. This is another one of his tests. Eyes glinting like the Inquisition emblem on top of his hat, the Inquisitor silently surveyed everyone's reactions, his gaze scanning for any delicate indicators of betrayals, looking for anyone who might unwittingly be caught off guard and reveal their true allegiance. The reactions of the crowd was varied. Most of the standing advisors were taken aback by the lifelike portrait. Catalina's brow furrowed. Her expression was one of surprise and disgust. Lord General Kruber and Marshal Gallioner had quite similar reactions. Both men remained stoic on the surface while sizing up the cult leader, looking for any perceived weakness and already planning on imaginary attacks. Diadina and both her palatines narrowed their eyes as they studied the rotating portrait with cold disdain. One could feel the righteous fury behind their burning gaze. Archdeacon Rycine's expression was one of open revulsion and anger. Oddly, his right hand hovered slightly, suggesting that the Archdeacon almost instinctively began to condemn the person in the portrait, only to halt himself from the futile gesture at the last second. Grand Magister Abeni's expression switched from being taken aback to defiance in the blink of an eye. Then there was Mugos Balpratus. The tech priest simply remained motionless. The tense moment suspended for a while. Just as I was assuming it would pass without incident, the Inquisitor suddenly spoke up with his unnerving voice, spooking the room into attention. Anyone recognizes this pitiful excuse for a human? After a flurry of silent head shakes, the Inquisitor continued. While we have little solid information, our many investigations led us to believe this man had recently become active again after a short period of inactivity since the warp breach incident. We have no doubt this arch-heretic was the individual responsible for the near damnation of Nusquam, The recent Scholastica Psychona attack shows he has not given up on that objective. Thabris paused, letting his words sink in before speaking again. Make no mistake, until this person is exterminated, the very existence of this imperial world is in jeopardy. I would also like to take this opportunity to disclose that all attempts in making contact with the wider Imperium outside the subsector have yet to yield any results. Everyone's expression darkened on the grim news while Thabris continued. As such, Nusquam with its psychic beacon has become the key to keeping the subsector coherent. By the decree of my superior Lord Solimus, Grand Master of the Inquisition of Ordo Terminus Obscura, the security of this planet is now a top priority. The Inquisitor made deliberate eye contact with each individual in the room before reaching a conclusion. Our foremost objective demands the utter eradication of this individual and every last vestige of chaos cults under his sway. His profile shall be disseminated to all. Employ every tool at your disposal. Exhaust every database. Sift through every record. Locate him. Should any lead arise, communicate swiftly with me or my operatives. Any lapse in compliance with this directive, and those found wanting, will face my unequivocal personal condemnation as excommunicate traitores. The room was silent after that, and I heard people gulping. After a while, it was Catalina who broke the silence. Aside from hunting these heretics, any update on the whereabouts of those mysterious Astartes on my planet? Thabris shook his head. Nothing. Either they had departed or remained utterly still following the last battle of the Civil War. We believe only a very small number of them have been present. The meeting continued for another short while before Thabris left hurriedly, chasing a new lead. The elites stayed and mingled for a little longer. If anything, I believe the face-to-face meeting promoted a closer collaboration between the people at the pinnacle of power. I spoke with a few of them, and Catalina took the chance to initiate some small talks with me. I had this odd sensation of being a senpai who was approached by an admiring kohai. Eventually, everyone departed. As the last of them was leaving, Mugos Balpratus approached and canted in binary bips. My princess, Dominus Cycle wishes to inform you that the vault excavation is reaching the end phase. I responded with a nod. With binary, we basically could converse privately in public. The Mugos continued, kindly keep your schedule open and expect his summons to the site within the next few standard days. I will inform the other parties involved of this. Acknowledged, I responded via his own servo skull. Time to rush through my firearms training. Blam, blam. The shots rang out as 2 auto pistol rounds landed dead center on the target dummy in a vacated small firing range. For the second time in my life, I was handling real firearms. While the sensation of weight and cold steel in my hand was fresh, the act of shooting itself felt natural. After firing the first few rounds and getting used to the recoil, I instinctively know where my shots would land. With me was Alicia and Wellmana. The Palatine and the Scholar were both wearing protective goggles and earmuffs. Until I stepped into the firing range a moment ago, it did not even occur to me hearing protection was a thing. I was spoiled rotten with the convenience of being a transhuman. We barred Malin from joining to conceal my capabilities. The disgruntled preacher almost pouted openly when she was informed of that decision. Under the watchful gaze of both girls, I fired my pistol downrange and consistently landed hit after hit, always dead center on my targets. Before finishing my first magazine, I already felt like a crack shot with the weapon. While happy with the result, I immediately ran into a problem when I wanted to reload. I turned to my instructor for help. Alicia, how do I? Oh, here. You do this to release the magazine. Alicia broke from being transfixed by my performance and started demonstrating with an identical weapon while talking about the standard safety procedure of reloading. Thank you, I said while carefully releasing and reloading a fresh magazine before aiming to fire again. This time I aimed for the furthest targets on the range and let loose, switching dummies every 2 shots, practicing my double tap. Again, I was consistently hitting all the targets, even the fast-moving ones. Being a literal living supercalculator with hyper-precise body control made this ballistic exercise a walk in the park. I put more rounds down the range and soon realized that as shooting was the easy part for me, I should improve on my speed. Speeding up, I started shooting rapidly and found no drop in my accuracy. I then worked on my reload speed. First, making sure my weapon was pointed in a safe direction, I ejected the spent magazine with the release button while grabbing a fresh magazine. After sliding the new magazine into my pistol, I racked the slide, felt around chambered, and let loose again with my shootings. I did the sequence one more time to master the reloading sequence and ejected the last spent magazine with a flick. It just felt faster. When all was done, I had emptied 4 magazines with a full hit rate. Can we move on to the next gun? I turned to ask and found both girls standing still, looking speechless with awe on their faces. After graduating from pistol, I was finally allowed to handle the venerable bolter. As I put my hands on a genuine bolter, feeling its weight and the cold of its gunmetal, a distant geek inside me was awakened. I was holding a bolter, a real freaking bolter. This was more than a weapon. This was the weapon, the signature Imperial weapon that had become legendary in status and was synonymous with the Space Marines and sororitas. The bolter in my hands was of the Godwin Daisy pattern, decorated with a golden fleur-de-lis near its muzzle, a scaled-down version from the ones used by Space Marines for standard human usage. Even so, due to my unfortunate stature, this scaled-down version of bolter still appeared comically massive in my hands. My subtle giddiness must be showing as Alicia simply stood back and let me have my moment with the gun. As I closely inspected every inch of it, I could tell this was an ancient but excellently maintained piece of heirloom of the sororitas. Lady SYRINE, it humbles me to see you venerate the weapon with such sincerity, Wellmana said after an unknown amount of time had passed, bringing me back to reality. Well, this is the divine instrument sanctioned by the Emperor to bring his wrath to the enemies of mankind, right? I said in a lame attempt to cover my tracks. Unexpectedly, both girls nodded approvingly on that statement. I might have accidentally earned more veneration points from them. I then listened to Alicia's quick lecture and observed her demonstration on basic bolter handling before finally got to do what every fan of the universe could only dream of, firing a real bolter. With everything set, I double-checked my pose before gingerly aligned the bolter's iron sight to a dummy and lightly squeezed the trigger. There was a surge of anticipation, a primal instinct screaming as the mechanism unleashed a potent round with lethal efficiency. With a loud roar, a bolt round exited the chamber, accompanied by a jolt of fierce but controlled recoil that reverberated through my entire body. In that split second between firing and impact, time seems to slow with a rush of adrenaline and a surge of euphoria as the bolt streaks through the air with deadly precision. I felt a sense of triumph as the target dummy was struck and torn asunder by the fury of the Emperor's wrath in the form of explosive force. Eager to experience the awesome sensation again, I fired 2 more shoots in quick succession, obliterating 2 more dummies. I sped up, obliterated 3 more targets in the next instance before deciding to switch things up a bit. Changing my pose, I held the massive weapon out with only one hand to test if my physiology could handle the strain of using a bolter like a pistol. A heartbeat later, 2 more exploding dummies answered my question. I was still dead accurate firing a bolter with just one hand. Ah, true grit, my old friend. Wait, can I do it left-handed? I switched the bolter to my supposedly less dominant left hand before firing again, and was rewarded with more splintering dummies. Judging by the result, I could probably go full DACA by shooting 2 bolters simultaneously like a dual pistol-wielding gangster without losing accuracy. I was ambidextrous without realizing it. Speaking of being ambidextrous, it reminded me of the list of skills to pick up for the sake of increasing my survival odds in this world. A quick glance at the full arsenal on display informed me that the gun lessons would not last long at my current pace. Alicia, I would like to expand the scope of my training, I said. Of course. What would you like to learn? The Palatine asked, looking curious. Well, there are the handlings of vehicles, sword fight, and mastery of power armor and jump pack usage. V2CH.23 armoring up. Denied access to observe SYRINE's training, Malin was pouting slightly as she wandered alone in the monastery. The preacher could not help but feel that either the sororitas had something against her, or they were hiding something with all their lame excuses. Still, Malin was extremely grateful for this assignment. Thus far, it had been nothing but a magnificent blessing. Just yesterday, she was in the front row seat as SYRINE commanded the Battle Sisters to confront the heretic forces at the Scholastica, and it was beyond glorious. That scene of the Holy Daughter steadily dropping one order after another to secure a flawless victory was more breathtaking than she could ever have imagined. To further amplify her shock, Malin later learned that it was the first time SYRINE had ever directly taken command of a battlefield. While still being dazzled by what she saw, later on the same day, during the wake session for the sisters fallen in their campaign, Malin witnessed the Holy Daughter summoning angelic birds. She had heard about it happening once before at the monastery gate, but never imagined witnessing it with her own eyes so soon. Seeing the God Emperor's miracles manifested one after another was an extremely rare privilege in itself. The position also propelled Malin to a meteoric rise within the ecclesiastical ranks. The young preacher suddenly found herself frequently interacting with many of the church's influential figures. Higher-ups who had once seemed distant and untouchable were now directly contacting her. It wasn't far from saying that Malin was living the dream. More than once, the preacher found herself staring into the mirror and wondering if she deserved all this. Everything happened so fast. The whiplash of changed fortune left her feeling stunned. Determined to make her time productive, Malin thought for a while before deciding to interview some of the sisters about their experience with the Holy Daughter. I blazed through training with all the guns available from the Sororita's armory. The comprehensive list includes an auto pistol, a bolter, a bolt pistol, a storm bolter, a condemner bolt gun, a plasma pistol, a melt-a-gun, various combi bolter variants, a hand flamer, a flamer, and a relic inferno pistol. Of these, the plasma pistol made the deepest impression as it literally fired miniature suns. It felt extra dangerous, and even Alicia was looking more apprehensive when I practiced a few shots with it. Still, my focus was on the operating and reloading procedure of the weapons, as the shooting part was a no-brainer for me. There were a few items which I was not encouraged to handle, namely the bigger versions of the famous Sororita's Holy Trinity of weaponry: the heavy bolter, heavy flamer, and multi-melta, something to do with the tradition and the long-held beliefs that it was beneath a commanding figure to operate heavy weapons. After some persistence, I was allowed to fire a single salvo from a heavy bolter. An ammo box was used since I was without a power armor to use the belt-fed backpack. The bigger cousin of the bolter was much heavier and a rush to handle. It barked louder, kicked like a wild stallion, but was still manageable for me. From my brief experience with the heavy bolter, I saw the reasons why it might be counterproductive for a field commander to wield heavy weapons. These massive guns required a lot more attention to properly operate, and its user could easily develop tunnel vision, an issue that could lead to dire circumstances on a dynamic battlefield. Soon my ammunition was spent, and the firing range was filled with splintered dummies, marking the end of my firearms crash course. It was time to move on to the next item on my to-learn list: power armor. After a short break, while Welmina made a quick report of my progress, we proceeded to the primary armory inside the monastery. The first thing I noticed about the place was the sheer frenzy of sounds. There was a constant clunking and clattering of material resonating throughout the whole space, a ceaseless hum of servo motors and hisses of pneumatic tools punctuating the air, all accompanied by the occasional sharp snap of power tools. The air was thick with the scent of machine oil, metal, ozone, mixed with the subtle tang of sweat. Entering the place was like stepping into the heart of a mechanized hive. Many things were moving and buzzing with chaotic but controlled purpose. The interior of the armory was dimly lit with harsh lights that cast stark shadows from many weapon racks and armor stands. It was a hive of activity, with busy workbenches swarmed by working servitors, and every space was cluttered with parts, tools, and half-assembled gear. Holographic displays flicker with readouts and diagnostics, casting a bluish glow on the faces of the many tech adepts in their activities. At one of the walls, rows of damaged Sororita's power armor stood at attention, their surfaces marred by the scars of battle, waiting to be repaired and maintained. Alicia moved swiftly, seemingly familiar with the place, whereas Welmina fumbled along. Like me, her eyes were darting all over the place. Soon we reached the center of this dizzying place, where a typical-looking tech priest stood. The figure was hooded in crimson robe with a simple omniscient axe in one hand. As Alicia walked over to greet the figure, I activated my noospheric connection to look around. The tech priest's digital signature was active and displayed a name: Hattie Ordle. Engine Seer Hattie, Alicia greeted casually. Probationary Palatine. I see you have esteemed guests with you. The tech priest responded in a synthetic voice that was definitely female, the only indication of gender since none was given away by her appearance. "I would like you to meet Lady SYRINE, the living saint candidate," Alicia said excitedly. "And have you met Sister Wellmana before? She currently acts as Lady SYRINE's personal assistant. We have spoken a few times at the library." Hattie exchanged a quick nod with Wellmana before turning her optics to me. "The fabled holy daughter. It is an honor. I am Ingenseer Hattie Ordle, overseer of this sanctified forge." "May the Omnicia bless thee," the Ingenseer said, forming the sign of Cog with her hands while looking at me while her glowing optics. I smiled and nodded in response. "Nice to meet you, Hattie. I apologize for the sudden request, but would it be possible for you to immediately prepare an operational power armor for Lady SYRINE?" Alicia asked, straight to the point. "At this time when we are most pressed with repair rights from all the damaged wargear of the returned expeditionary forces?" Hattie gestured around us, hinting at the massive workload. "Lady SYRINE's request has priority," Alicia said confidently. "Very well with me." Hattie nodded and started walking, prompting an ancient-looking servo skull to fall in behind her like a loyal pet. We followed her into another space that was treated with some sound insulation, muffling the frenzied cacophony of the forge. There were more Sororita's power armor here, but unlike the ones outside, these appeared to be in pristine condition. "I suppose we can start with a size S and tweak to optimize," Hattie said after throwing me a quick glance, quoting at my less than formidable stature. The tech priest then walked to a particular row of power armor that was slightly smaller than the rest. She pointed to those and said to me, "Please pick one and we can work from there." I looked at my options with complicated feelings. Back on Earth, I had a hobby friend who openly declared it was his lifelong dream to put on a functioning power armor, to see and feel what it was like operating such a mythical piece of war gear. Back then, his silly remark was backed by many in the hobby circle. Like, who could resist the notion of armoring up like a space marine? And here I was, standing on the edge on realizing that distant common dream, but all my focus landed on an unfortunate detail on the power armors before me. Those curvy breastplates tipped with an extra pair of decorative plating in the form of Sororita's fleur-de-lis symbol. I never gave it a second though seeing them on the sisters. In my mind, they even looked kinda cool, but the very idea of putting those on myself sent revulsion down my spine. Oh, throne. Why? Fortunately, some of the offered armors came without those embarrassing details. Going through the few acceptable options, I clung to the plainest-looking suit like a life raft in a rough sea and declared decisively, "I will take this. This is not up for debate." While both girls did not comment, from their thoughts I knew they did wonder about why I went for the most unembellished piece. Just when we were about to proceed further, I sensed some unusual resonance. Something was approaching fast. As I turned to face the direction, an instant later 2 servo skulls flew into the area. Reacting to the unusual circumstances, Alicia swiftly placed herself between me and the drones, her bolt pistol drawn and ready. Wellmana stiffened up. The scholar usually went unarmed inside the monastery, so she just stuck closer to me. One of the servo skulls then approached Hattie and dropped a binary message. "By the decree of Mugos Balpratus Aukank, cease your activity. Relax, Alicia." "I recognize these," I said just as the Mugos himself walked in uninvited, prompting the Palatine to move her aim to the tech priest. Balpratus looked at the weapon, pointing at him blankly, and stopped his movement. "Why are you here?" Alicia asked. "Sorry for the sudden intrusion. I was looking for Lady SYRINE." Balpratus ignored the weapon pointing at him and bowed to me. "I was only made aware of your intention of retrofitting a set of power armor a moment ago. Since I received no response from hailing your servo skull, I came here myself. Ops, I left it in my room. Solace is kinda like my too often misplaced handphone at the moment." "What is this regarding?" Alicia demanded, not relaxing her aim. "Palatine Alicia." Balpratus turned to her and replied with his cold, flat synthetic voice. "You should know as well as I do. Everything concerning Lady SYRINE is strictly confidential. Ingenseer Hattie does not have enough security clearance for this operation." Alicia blinked and lowered her weapon. Seeing the battle sister had stood down, Balpratus canted to Hattie. "Ingenseer, I will take over from here. With all due respect, Mugos, this is my place, my forge." "By whose authority are you ordering me?" Hattie asked, her dissatisfaction apparent. I carry the jurisdiction of Arch-Tech Priest Dominus Cryptor Cycle. You are to do as I say. You may voice your objection to him directly, Valpratus replied as one of his servo-skulls canted a series of binary codes to Hattie, to which she eventually bowed her head. After that, all four of us moved back to my room with the set of power armor I selected, the suit carried over by a servitor from the armory. First, I was handed a body glove that came with the package to change into. It was a skin-tight outfit that was covered with fibromuscle. This was the underpart of the power armor's inner system that was rarely seen up close in the lore. Upon closer inspection, the sheer sophistication of the body glove and the armor pieces left me in awe. The body glove was essentially an outfit of interwoven synthetic muscle fibers that was made from a composite of lightweight yet hyperelastic material. The material itself shimmered with a subdued dark metallic blue, and on the surface of all the fibers was an intricate web of microweave patterns, mimicking the natural striations of muscle tissue. Running along the limbs and torso were delicate lines of circuitry, hinting at the body glove's integration with a power armor system. The armor pieces were mostly constructed from an advanced ceramite composite, famous for being almost impenetrable with small arms fire, the same type of material used on Space Marine power armor. Their interiors were lined with shock-absorbing paddings, providing further protection to its user. These plates also featured some ingenious interlocking system that was designed to provide maximum flexibility. Even with my untrained eyes, these things looked really expensive. I had a better understanding of the depth of technology and resources needed to construct these gear, and it became apparent why only the really powerful factions in the Imperium could employ power armor troops. After changing into the body glove, under the supervision of Valpratus, I began putting on the armor with the help from Alicia and Wellmana. This part of the process reminded me about cosplayers putting on their elaborate costumes. Only in this case, it was a real functioning piece of war gear. Piece by piece, the armor was affixed onto me, and I noticed the expression of both girls brightening up. Alicia was excited to see me donning her order's color, whereas Wellmana was thinking I made the perfect image of a cute novitiate suiting up for the first time. Soon the final piece, the power backpack, was put in its place, and I felt the full weight of my armor. It was unexpectedly manageable, but my sensation for weight was so skewed from a normal person, I had no idea how heavy it would be for a standard human. There was a slight hum as power was turned on, and as the systems came online, I immediately felt the weight pulling on me lessened as the armor started to support itself with the activated fibromuscle network. Intrigued, I moved and flexed my arms, testing my movement. "My lady, try walking around. Please be careful," Alicia advised, and I started moving as suggested. At first it felt strange. The activated fiber bundles acted like extra muscles that automatically mimicked my movement while providing momentum and aided strength. The power armor and its space-age materials felt amazing. Although not reaching the second skin level described in a lot of Space Marine stories, it was surprisingly comfortable despite having all the extra layers of stuff added onto me. I got used to it and was moving naturally in no time. While doing so, I caught a glimpse of Alicia's mind as she briefly reminisced on her embarrassing incident of immediately tripping over while using power armor for the first time. Valpratus, who was silently observing all this time, spoke up. "My lady, please try moving your arm as quickly as possible for a stress test." "What I need to do? Throw a punch?" I asked. "That would do." Valpratus nodded. I did as instructed, throwing out a punch, and felt my movement strangely impeded. "Again," Valpratus instructed. I threw a harder punch. It was faster this time, but still definitely slower than if I was unarmored. How did it feel? Restrained. "It feels like the armor was slowing me down," I answered honestly. "As I predicted, it could not keep up with you," Valpratus said with a contemplating gesture. "What is happening, Muggos?" asked Alicia. "The armor system is hardwired to human limitations, not meant for a user with my lady's magnificent level of physiology. I can adjust the internal settings to an extent. It will be serviceable but not optimal," Valpratus said as he extended a mechadendrite, a thick, mechanical wire extension that could move like a tentacle, and connected it to a hidden port on my armor. The tech priest then spent some time working on a data slate before saying, "I have tweaked some settings and just set the encryption level for biometric readout of your armor to the highest level. In addition, I added extra tweaks to mask your twin heartbeats." The tech priest's words stunned me and the girls for a second, That was definitely something we had overlooked. He then asked me to throw another punch. I did so and felt a huge difference, both sisters flinching as my armored fist flew out with inhuman speed, the force amplified by the armored mass. It is not 100%, but a massive improvement, I said, quite happy with the improvement. I am afraid this is as far as it can go. To fully compensate, you will need at the very least Astartes grade system, Valpratus said while nodding sagely to himself before continuing to explain. Do note from this point onwards this armor is no longer suitable for unaugmented human usage. To do so risks severe user injuries. Why is that? Wellmana asked, her scholarly curiosity intrigued. Valpratus turned to look at her before answering. The motion feedback limiter had been set to minimum, effectively disabled. As a result, under extreme circumstances, a standard human might experience muscle tear or even bone fracture with improper usage. As both girls turned pale on that horrifying notion, Valpratus turned to me and continued his lecture. My lady, if possible, please refrain from excessive usage, else the armor's system might not hold. At any rate, I highly suggest having a custom set of master-crafted power armor tailor-made for your specifications. You know anyone capable of doing that? I asked while flexing my arms, still getting used to the sensation of being encased in a functioning power armor. Valpratus bowed again. I know a few individuals capable of such a feat. With your permission, I will gladly undertake this project and make sure the final result is thrice blessed by the Omnicia, befitting your status. The tech priest left after receiving my consent to custom build my armor. What followed was crash courses about basic operational procedures and equipment familiarization. The first thing I needed to do was to get familiar with putting on the armor by myself. Getting this part right was tedious but necessary. After a few trials, I was able to go from just the body glove to fully armored up unassisted under 5 minutes. There was still room for improvement on my speed, but it would do for now. The trickiest part being putting on the power backpack by myself unaided. They usually used a custom stand for that. With the fundamentals sorted, we proceeded to an obstacle training course. After Wellmana helped me sort out my hair, tucking the ones on the back of my head into my body glove, I put on the sabot pattern helmet that came with the armor for the first time. As the solid piece of headgear slid smoothly down my head and completed an environmental seal with a soft hiss, the system inside the helm came alive as a myriad of colorful indicator runes lit up. My breathing and the low humming of my power pack started to echo softly inside the sealed suit. The surrounding sounds became muffled until the audio feed was turned on. I looked around and a targeting rune appeared. It moved around in my field of view, tracking my eye movement. I turned to Alicia, and immediately the targeter labeled her as a friendly and even recognized her rank, marking the sister as a palatine. The system interface was high-tech yet gothic-looking, typical of the unique, grim, dark aesthetic. Another crash course later, I familiarized myself with the helmet settings and usage on photovisor and presight settings, as well as how to use the built-in comlink like a normal user even though I could access it directly with my ability. That sorted, we proceeded with the main event and I went through the hoops of going through the obstacle course in my armor. It felt like a movement tutorial of a first-person shooter. That said, having a Primarch grade mind embodiment, I was operating at an inhuman level of physical efficiency, and it showed. Whether it be running, overcoming walls, plank crossing, rope climbing, or even the notorious monkey bar swing, I easily aced through all of them without trying much or breaking a sweat. According to Wellmana, I even broke several speed records along the way, but beating human records as a transhuman was nothing to be proud of. After just half a day's work, Alicia nodded with satisfaction at my performance and declared I was fully proficient with the basics of power armor operation. With that, it was time to set my sight on to the next major challenge: jump pack usage. V2CH.24 Maiden Skydiving. It was late in the lunch hour and Malin was conversing with a random group of battle sisters she had met in the mess hall. At first, the sororitas were guarded against an outsider, but the preacher's bubbly personality and apparent devotion towards SYRINE soon relaxed and won them over. They were chatting amicably when the preacher took the chance to state what was on her mind. Rejoice, sisters. We are all truly blessed. Just yesterday, like many of you, I was lucky enough to see the divine doves with my own eyes. By his will, together we should soon witness the canonization of a living saint. I was wondering if anyone has any interesting stories about the Holy Daughter to share? What is this about? A sister asked, a hint of wariness in her tone. It is part of my duty to chronicle an emerging living saint's many manifested miracles and deeds for posterity. Malin spoke with a sense of purpose, but her keenness was met with silence. It was a short while before a battle sister spoke up. Well, now that I think about it, I believe the Holy Daughter saved my life. The sudden confession surprised everyone around the table. Sister, I would very much like to hear your story. Malin responded quickly, her eyes sparkling with the enthusiasm found only on a true fan. Sister Ephraim, I do not recall you ever having a direct interaction with the Holy Daughter, warned the Sister Superior at the table. If this is an act of self-indulgence and your story turns out to be nothing but fabrication, you'll be confined to the cabin of solitude and made to copy the full litany of repentance 300 times as penance. I am not saying she personally pulled me away from danger or anything like that, but hear me out, Sister Ephraim said calmly. It happened yesterday when the heretics clashed with us. During the thickest fighting, 2 hostiles were suddenly registered to be very close to my position. I immediately turned my bolter in that direction, but found myself pointing at a short wall obscured by some foliage. Damn targeter. I swear they are always glitching in the worst of times, laughed one of the sisters. Ephraim shrugged and continued her tale. That was my initial thought too. Just as I was about to move on, 2 heretics showed their heads and peeked over from that wall, exactly where I saw them to be and right into my iron sight. How convenient. Hey, I wasn't going to question my blessings. Firing my bolter, I blew the head off from the first heretic and shot the other through the flimsy wall. Then, bang, huge explosion. Throne's blood. I think I heard that one. Far left flank in the courtyard, right? Yes, I was at the left flank. Even with the main impact cushioned by the wall, I was thrown off my feet. Turns out the scums had crock grenades on them. If those bastards had managed to sneak up to me with those, I surely would be at his side right now. While I am glad you came out fine, what has this got to do with the Holy Daughter? Malin asked, confused by the story. You don't get it, preacher? Sister Ephraim explained. The targeting system in our helmet doesn't work over solid objects. The fact that I saw those heretics before their ambush must have been a miracle. I had heard a few stories like this before experiencing it myself. It seemed to only happen when the Holy Daughter was around. Now that you mentioned it, another battle sister chimed in. Several times in the midst of battle, the heretics' positions suddenly became astonishingly vivid in the redoubt. I avoided a few risky situations because of that. Wait, you experienced that too? Malin watched in astonishment as the sisters around the table started sharing their strangely similar tales. Sister Ephraim thought for a moment before slowly untangling the prayer beads with a miniature symbol of the mini-storm that was tied to her glove. The battle sister then held the symbol up with her hands, gave it a light kiss before looking at Malin with fierce conviction. Preacher, I stand by my account and swear by the throne it contains no falsehood. As of now, I truly believe it to be one of the Holy Daughter's more subtle blessings. It will be your duty to verify these claims. Malin's jaw dropped. She had been there when it all went down but had never contemplated on the possibility of missing out on miracles manifested right before her eyes. I was having fun and did not realize lunchtime had arrived until I felt the pang of hunger on Wellmanaw's mind. Alicia, on the other hand, fared much better for being a battle sister. Regardless, I insisted the girls go take a quick lunch before we move on with further training. Since I was not feeling hungry at all and was still on a once-per-day meal arrangement, I didn't join them. Usually this would be my library time, but there was little point in doing that anymore. Plus, it felt strange reading books while wearing power armor. In the end, I decided to just go back to my room. After returning to my not-so-humble lodging, I sat down and noticed the sturdiness of the furniture. The Gothic chair was delicate-looking, yet it handled the extra weight of my power armor without a squawk of protest. I took off my helmet, putting it aside before pulling the back of my hair out from my body glove. My eyes were looking around and settled on one of the mirrors where a heavenly girl stared back. The sight of her silky platinum hair cascading down onto her color-matching dull silver armor was such a vision of otherworldly grace it took my breath away. Is it because of the power armor, or I am looking more and more like a living saint? As I sat there simply staring at my reflection, The disturbing vision from last night, when my face was a featureless blur, jumped at me, jolting my mind. What was my face like back on Earth? Strangely, even with my photographic memory, I was having difficulty recalling my old face. All I could picture was a demigoddess. It was still less than a month since I took over, but with the many things that happened since then, it felt like a few lifetimes had passed. Absent-mindedly, I ran. Analytica. On myself. A familiar line of text appeared in my vision. Name: SYRINE. Primarch minorities. Psychopassive mode. Abnormal existence. With bated breath I ran. Analytica. Specifically on the abnormal existence. And like many attempts before this, my vision went blurry for a fraction of a second and all the text disappeared. It will break you. I almost heard her words again. I let out a soft sigh and settled down, then tried but failed to relax as my mind ran wild assessing the current situation. Being a person with a sedentary lifestyle in my past life, the notion of me actively pursuing physically demanding activities felt strange at first, but I soon got used to and even learned to enjoy it. That, and all of it, felt necessary. A gut feeling had been constantly nibbling at the back of my mind, telling me another storm was brewing. Between the active chaos cults with its leader on the move, the notorious Cardinal returning, the still missing mysterious space marines, and the hint of a demonic grudge, there was no shortage of troubles in the near future. The threats I knew about were bad enough. Yet, my experience from decades of stumbling through reality whispered another chilling truth. In this vast, unforgiving world, the most lethal threats usually lurked in the depths of unknown shadows, unseen and looming in places I wouldn't even imagine exist. From what was known to me from common lore, the abundant availability of options for tactical insertion in this era, like drop pod assaults and teleporting strike forces, was a thing. The ability for resourceful enemies to send elite super soldiers wearing armor as thick as a battle tank directly to your face was a reality, rendering the concept of safe behind the front line an antiquated point. Primarch minorities or not, I would be as good as dead if I was ever cornered by such attacks without the means to confront them. Hence the need to quickly learn up on martial skills. This was the Grimdark universe after all, a place where direct and brutal confrontation was inevitable and rival battlefield commanders had an uncanny chance of settling their differences in a final glorious melee combat. I certainly would not fancy being caught up in such a scenario without having the skills and tools to deal with them. I had for now learned to shoot and put on power armor. While having power armor was good for increasing the odds of surviving a battlefield, having the ability to fly would be much better for hightailing out of any danger, so getting jump pack training was another high priority for me. Besides, who didn't dream of flying around by putting rockets on one's back as a kid? On that note, anyone familiar with the grim dark universe will instantly recognize the sororitas seraphims from a glance. Power-armored ladies with jump packs that were shaped into angelic wings. What is not to like about them? However, upon closer examination of what it took to create the seraphims, the absurdity of it becomes glaringly apparent. In fact, the very concept of seraphims teetered on the edge of pure insanity. The ecclesiarchy, or the church, with the blessings of the Imperium, essentially chose the finest examples of ambidextrous individuals from the childbearing gender of our species for this role. The selected girls then underwent special forces, level training from a young age, while being constantly indoctrinated with religious faith. Those who survived the brutal process were equipped with power armor and jump packs on their back, and then these girls were launched directly into battle to engage all manners of galactic monstrosities in close quarters, pistol range combat. And that was essentially one of the most highly trained human military units a galactic spanning empire of humanity could offer. To meet the basic requirements for becoming a seraphim, one must possess the dexterity of a ballerina and the base body strength of a weightlifter. Adding being ambidextrous on top of that, it was simply well beyond the capabilities of an average human. As I contemplated on the subject, the master records for past seraphim trainees from the monastery's library solidified in my mind. The convenience of it was a welcomed surprise. With the information available in my mental space, I went through with it and noted the chillingly substantial training injuries and dropout rate. There was, however, no denying the winged ladies' effectiveness, nor how glorious they looked on the field. The few times I personally witnessed them with their mastery of flight always left me with a sense of awe. Every single one of them was a man-sized lethal combination of firepower with proper protection and notable mobility. As I daydreamed, my superhuman-level senses picked up on approaching footsteps and their vibrations. A small crowd had come to visit. I sent Solace to open the door, and my visitors turned out to be Canoness Diadina with all 4 of her palatines, Markila, Wellmana, and strangely, Valpratus again. Notably, everyone here knew my true identity as daughter of the Emperor. Upon seeing me in power armor, Diadina's usual icy facade melted, and she smiled proudly. After the Canoness bowed to me with the group, she moved in for a closer inspection, eyeing me up and down while beaming with a sort of motherly pride. "My lady, you look truly magnificent," Diadina praised, and the palatines nodded in agreement, with a few of them silently wondering why my armor was so plain-looking. Speaking of mind-reading, I sensed a subtle tension, revealing that this wasn't just a casual visit. "Thank you. Surely you all weren't just here to see me in my armor?" I asked, carefully keeping my tone friendly. About that, Diadina bowed again, and when she raised her head again her expression was grim. "Please enlighten us. Are we to expect any major confrontations in the near future?" I found out an edict had just arrived from the church. For the first time in 400 years, the Order of the Shining Beacon was formally ordered to expand and increase their ranks. That, coupled with my timing of sudden interest in martial training and putting on a power armor, had spooked the sisters. Naturally, they speculated I had foreseen some serious troubles ahead. While technically they were correct on that assumption, I was no Eldari farser and had no prescience into the future. It was kind of awkward. After reconfirming with the sisters that I was preparing myself to avoid another weapon fumbling incident, everyone relaxed and the topic of discussion moved to my request for jump pack training. Due to the high-risk nature of jump pack usage, while none had said it out loud, the sisters were worried about the risks involved. Imagine being held responsible for putting rockets on the back of the prophesied Holy Daughter and sending her flying at literally breakneck speed into a cliff. Muggos Valpratus came in handy at this point and flexed his knowledge on the subject matter. "Omnicia be my witness. I can guarantee that under standard atmospheric conditions on this planet, Lady SYRINE's hyper-advanced biology could easily withstand terminal velocity impact with minimal ill effect. Such activities, when done with the necessary precautions, pose little threat to her well-being." What? In gaming terms, I am immune to fall damage? While that sounded assuring coming from a tech priest, I had no interest in ever trying that out myself. It also reminded me of an incident during the Horus Heresy where a traitor Primarch survived multiple direct hits from Titan weaponry. Compared to that, the force of a relatively high-speed collision did look puny in comparison. Jump pack usage requires a thought control interface. Will Lady SYRINE be getting an augmentation? Sister Markila asked a surprising question. Now that she mentioned it, since well-known jump units like Assault Space Marines and Sororitas Seraphims were usually depicted as carrying weapons with both hands, it was never really made clear how they controlled their jump pack. Other than the demands of near instantaneous control and large-scale data transmission, that would not be necessary. A non-intrusive brain signal reader would suffice. Valpratus answered with the air of an expert before turning to me for confirmation. That, and unless my lady wishes to accept augmentations for maximum performance, I will gladly provide assistance if that is the case. Speaking of augmentations, in this universe conjured the horrifying images of many Primarchs and their warriors who embraced such body modifications during the Crusade era. Those guys went all out on augmentics, basically retrofitting mechanical parts directly into their heads and bodies, then plugged in huge amounts of neural connectors and wires in the name of efficiency. "Not for now," I answered with a poker face. More like, "Not forever if I can help it." The discussion then went to the vault. The Sororitas were somewhat excited since the final countdown to accessing it had begun. Being the typical devotees, the sisters had made a deal with Cryptorer on their rights to lay claim to anything of religious significance. Wellmana even took the chance and asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "My lady, any idea on what we will find inside that vault?" "Sorry, there's no improvement to my missing memory, so I really have no idea," I confessed with a shake of my head. "We will have to find out what's inside together. Personally, though, I believe the odds of finding any religious treasures to be extremely low." The impromptu meeting then ended with most of the visitors leaving. Alicia, Welmana, Sister Markila, and Mugos Balpratis had stayed behind to help with my next training program. Surprisingly, Markila once served as one of the winged ladies and qualified as a Seraphim trainee instructor. First thing we did was to test my compatibility with a brain decoder, a device that enabled jump packs to be controlled solely via brain signal, leaving the user's hands free. I learned these came in many forms. It could be embedded in a hood, shaped into a headband, worn as a circlet, or built into the decorative iron halo that stood on the power pack. To my relief, the test revealed I had excellent compatibility with the device, rendering the heavy-handed approach of augmentics or implants unnecessary. Balpratis then left to personally procure and prepare my jump pack from the armory, and I imagined Engineer Hattie would not be too pleased with that. We then followed Markila to a special large chamber where they had a lot of equipment specially used for the Seraphim training program. Arrangements were made, so we had the place all to ourselves. Still in my power armor, I was put through the works, tested on body strength, grip strength, agility, sense of balance, general coordination, both aerobic and anaerobic endurance. While the sisters made little comments on my tests, from what I read on their minds and the occasional odd facial expressions, I knew my scores were exceptional. Yours truly was not a human, after all. The finale was a G-force tolerance test on a giant centrifuge. I was strapped to the contraption as it rotated at an ever-increasing speed. After the seemingly terrifying maximum speed was reached, they had to stop the test for failing to determine my threshold for GLOC, a point where the loss of consciousness occurred from excessive G-forces. With that done, I was deemed overqualified for the Seraphim program. Immediately starting my next phase of training, I was introduced to a gigantic indoor vertical wind tunnel that was used to simulate the free fall period during a jump pack operation. It was a huge thing, measuring 64 feet in width, large enough for a whole squad to practice free falling together. Its main structure was made of a transparent material for easy viewing from the outside. While it looked like a dream playground for indoor skydivers, it was hellishly loud when turned on, to the point where normal humans would need to wear a helmet or hearing protection when practicing inside it. A non-operational Seraphim jump pack was then fitted onto the back of my power armor. Although made of relatively lightweight material, I felt a significant extra pull from the winged backpack. Markila also put on a mock jump pack for a live demonstration. The aim of this exercise is to familiarize yourself with the air drag of having a jump pack on your back, Markila explained. Try climbing with the air, and then diving and repeat the process. She then put on her decorated helmet and dived into the huge column of rising air. In the next moment, she was ascending and descending seemingly at will by expertly controlling her pose. While being a total noob at the art of free falling, I nevertheless was able to quickly learn about its basics just by observing how she controlled her posture. The veteran sister continued her routine a few more times and performed a few tricks before dropping down to exit the wind tunnel. "Now you try, my lady," Markila said with a bow. With my default mindset of being a couch potato still lingering at the back of my mind, I put on my helmet and stepped into the tunnel with trepidation. A huge gale of air pushed me from beneath. The roar of rushing air was audible through my helmet, and suddenly my body was unshackled from the force of gravity, and I was floating. It was a totally fresh yet familiar experience, similar to my flight during a psychic projection, but with my consciousness staying in my physical body. It felt like pure bliss. I could not help but smile at the liberating sensation. Due to having a pair of wings fixed to my back, the odd aerodynamic profile of myself, riding the rising air did take a short while to get used to. Eventually, I got the hang of it and was able to climb up and down the column of air, albeit in a boring fashion. As I floated around wondering what to do next, a book materialized in my mind, titled Soaring on Wings of Faith and Fire, a chronicle written by Sister Silval, who was one of the most prominent Seraphim during the Order's long history. Her most notable feat was leading a descent from high altitude and intercepting a rebel bomber squadron. Such was her skill that she was able to drop near the lead flyer to deliver a fatal blow, breaking the squadron's formation just before their bombing run. Within the span of a heartbeat, Silval's many chronicled tips and tricks on her decades of expert jump pack usage flashed before my mind, prompting me to immediately try them out. I quickly went through a series of standard tricks like backflying, daffy, and carving with no difficulties. Wanting a challenge, I decided to just test the limits of my body control by trying one of the hardest known diving moves mentioned in the book, a personalized version of the head-down carving. After rising to the top of the tunnel, I brought my head down and aligned my body vertically. The rush of air intensified with its muffled roar rising inside my helmet as my body became a streamlined missile that cut through the wind. The sensation was indescribable, a mix of sheer thrill and power. Descending like an aerial predator, I initiated the carved dive with a slight tilt of my head and shoulders. Instantly, I felt the change in airflow, guiding me into a spiraling descent. My body rotated smoothly, and the ground beneath me started to spin, creating an exhilarating panorama where the horizon became a constantly shifting line, always tilting and spinning. I carved down the air column while imitating Sister Sylval's signature pose shown in her book, with my arms close to my sides, hands flat and my legs slightly apart, toes pointed to top. Feeling the delicate balance of aerodynamics, I adjusted my posture minutely, every movement precise and deliberate as I steered my dive in a spiraling motion of controlled chaos. It was understood from Sylval's notes that with jump pack usage and proper practice, this move could be performed to create an erratic flight path that was capable of avoiding incoming small arms fire. The world below became a blur as my rotation sped up, and my vision morphed into a kaleidoscope of lights, colors, and shapes. Between the rapid rotations, I caught glimpses of the sisters who were watching me. The expression on their faces, a mixture of bewilderment and anxiety. Time to stop playing. I brought my arms out to the sides for drag and arched my back to slow down. The transition from head down to belly to earth was smooth and almost felt well-rehearsed for me despite this being my first attempt. The air resistance greatly increased as I controlled my posture to decelerate before landing and exited the tunnel. The sisters walked up to me as I took off my helmet. "How was that?" I asked, being quite proud but still a bit unsure about my maiden dive performance. "My lady, was that Sister Sylval's spiral of faith?" Markila asked. "Yes. Was it close?" "Very much so. That's a very arduous maneuver barely mastered by half of the seasoned seraphims in our order," Markila answered, her stoic facade barely containing the awe in her mind. "Oops. I might have pushed all my cheats too hard to pull that off."